In this video, we're exploring how the entire story of SpongeBob and Bikini Bottom would have changed if SpongeBob never met Squidward. From the Krusty Krab to every friendship and rivalry that shaped the series, everything would be different. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. First up, we got Help Wanted. In the original Help Wanted episode, SpongeBob wakes up excited because today's the day he's finally going to apply for a job at the Krusty Krab. He's been dreaming about this moment for years. After getting ready and psyching himself up, he runs toward the restaurant shouting, "I'm ready," over and over. But just as he's about to walk in, his confidence completely crumbles. He tells himself he can't do it and starts running away. That's when Patrick stops him and gives him a pep talk, reminding him that his first words were, "May I take your order?" and that he made a spatula out of toothpicks in woodshop. Patrick's motivation gets SpongeBob fired up again, and he charges into the Krusty Krab ready to apply. Meanwhile, Squidward sees SpongeBob approaching, notices the Help Wanted sign, and panics. He rushes inside to warn Mr. Krabs before SpongeBob can apply. When SpongeBob does get inside, Mr. Krabs and Squidward try to get rid of him by sending him on an impossible task to find a hydrodynamic spatula with port and starboard attachments and turbo drive, something they're sure doesn't exist. While SpongeBob is gone, 5 buses full of hungry anchovies arrive and overwhelm the restaurant. Just when things seem hopeless, SpongeBob returns with the impossible spatula and single-handedly serves all the anchovies with incredible speed and skill. Mr. Krabs is so impressed that he hires SpongeBob on the spot, and SpongeBob officially becomes a fry cook at the Krusty Krab. But what if Squidward hadn't seen SpongeBob coming that day? What if he'd been too focused on cleaning that graffiti off the window to notice the eager yellow sponge running down the street? This one small change in timing would have completely altered how SpongeBob got his job, and the ripple effects would have shaped the entire dynamic at the Krusty Krab from day one. In this alternative timeline, Squidward is scrubbing away at the graffiti that says "loser" underneath his portrait. He's completely absorbed in trying to remove this humiliating vandalism, muttering complaints to himself about teenage delinquents and lack of respect. He doesn't look up. He doesn't see SpongeBob approaching. He doesn't notice the Help Wanted sign that's been hanging in the window. And most importantly, he doesn't rush inside to warn Mr. Krabs about the overeager applicant heading their way. SpongeBob bursts through the doors of the Krusty Krab at full speed, still shouting, "I'm ready," with the same enthusiasm he had in the original timeline. But this time, there's a crucial difference. Mr. Krabs is standing at the register, and there's no whispered warning from Squidward. There's no pre-established plan to get rid of this applicant. Mr. Krabs just sees an extremely enthusiastic young sponge who clearly wants to work at his restaurant. SpongeBob delivers his prepared speech about joining the Krusty crew, but just like in the original timeline, he trips on that nail in the floorboard and bounces around the restaurant like a pinball. He crashes into walls, ricochets off the ceiling, and finally rolls to a stop at Mr. Krabs' feet. When he asks, "So, when do I start?" Mr. Krabs sees the same lack of coordination that made him doubt SpongeBob in the original timeline. He makes the same comment about SpongeBob not having his sea legs, but here's where things diverge significantly. Without Squidward's warning, and without that conspiratorial moment where they plotted to send SpongeBob on an impossible errand, Mr. Krabs approaches this situation differently. He's a businessman first and foremost, and he sees a young applicant who's clearly desperate to work. That means he can probably pay him less than minimum wage. Mr. Krabs is considering just hiring SpongeBob on the spot for cheap labor when Squidward finally walks back inside, having finished cleaning the graffiti. He sees SpongeBob standing there in front of Mr. Krabs and immediately groans. He recognizes SpongeBob as that annoying neighbor who's always trying to befriend him, who waves too enthusiastically every morning, who plays that ridiculous nose clarinet at all hours. Squidward opens his mouth to object, to tell Mr. Krabs that hiring this particular sponge would be a terrible mistake, but he's too late. Mr. Krabs has already made his decision based purely on economics. He figures an enthusiastic worker who'll accept low pay is better than no worker at all, especially with that Help Wanted sign attracting attention. He tells SpongeBob he's hired, but he'll be starting at minimum wage minus a training fee and a uniform deposit. SpongeBob is so ecstatic that he doesn't even process the questionable deductions Mr. Krabs is describing. He's just thrilled to be part of the Krusty crew. What happens next is where this timeline really starts to differ from the original. There's no impossible spatula quest. There's no moment where SpongeBob has to prove himself under pressure. He doesn't get to demonstrate his extraordinary fry cook abilities in a dramatic fashion. Instead, Mr. Krabs just points him toward the kitchen and tells him to get started. Squidward is assigned to train him, which Squidward absolutely hates. He's stuck showing SpongeBob where the spatulas are, how the grill works, and what goes on a Krabby Patty. SpongeBob is absorbing everything with intense focus, asking a million questions, and making Squidward increasingly irritated with every, "But why do you do it that way?" and "Is there a special technique for flipping?" The real test comes about 20 minutes into SpongeBob's first day when those 5 buses full of anchovies arrive. In the original timeline, this happened while SpongeBob was gone, creating the perfect crisis for him to resolve heroically. But in this alternative version, SpongeBob is already in the kitchen, having just started his first real shift. The anchovies flood in, overwhelming Squidward at the register with their incessant meep 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 demands for food. Squidward tries to maintain order, tries to get them to form a single file line, but it's chaos. Mr. Krabs realizes they're about to be crushed by this anchovy tsunami, and he yells back to the kitchen for SpongeBob to start cooking. This is SpongeBob's moment, but it happens very differently. He doesn't have that magical hydrodynamic spatula with port and starboard attachments and turbo drive. He just has a regular spatula that Squidward showed him 5 minutes ago. He doesn't make a dramatic flying entrance with red lights flashing. He's just a nervous new employee facing his first real rush. SpongeBob starts cooking, and while he does have natural talent, it's not the same spectacular display we saw in the original timeline. He's fast and he's enthusiastic, but he's also making rookie mistakes. Some patties are slightly overcooked because he's still learning the grill's hot spots. Some orders are missing toppings because he's rushing and forgetting steps. He's getting better as he goes, learning on the fly, but it's messy. Krabby Patties are flying out the window, but not with the precision and perfection of that original montage. The anchovies are getting fed, but barely. Some of them are complaining. Some patties are hitting anchovies in the face instead of landing neatly in their fins. It's controlled chaos rather than a smooth operation. Mr. Krabs and Squidward are still getting tossed around by the crowd, still climbing that pole to escape the anchovy wave, but there's no heroic rescue. SpongeBob just keeps cooking through the chaos, doing his best, and eventually the anchovies are fed enough that they start leaving. It's not a triumphant moment, it's more like barely surviving a disaster. When the dust settles and the last bus drives away, the Krusty Krab is a mess. There are half-eaten patties on the floor, condiment stains on the walls, and an exhausted SpongeBob standing in the kitchen covered in grease. Mr. Krabs comes back to assess the damage. He looks at the disaster zone that used to be his restaurant. He looks at SpongeBob, who's clearly trying his best, but also clearly inexperienced. In the original timeline, Mr. Krabs welcomed SpongeBob aboard with pride and called his performance the finest fast foodsmanship he'd ever seen. In this timeline, Mr. Krabs just nods slowly and says, "Well, ye survived your first rush. That's something." It's not exactly high praise, but it's not a firing either. SpongeBob takes this as a massive compliment because he's SpongeBob and he'll find the positive in anything. He's so happy he gets to keep the job that he doesn't notice Mr. Krabs quietly calculating how much the damages will cost and how he'll deduct it from SpongeBob's already minimal paycheck. The character dynamics that emerge from this alternative version are fascinating because they're built on a completely different foundation. In the original timeline, SpongeBob earned his job through an incredible display of skill under pressure. He proved himself beyond any doubt, which gave him a certain level of respect from Mr. Krabs, even if Squidward remains skeptical. But in this alternative timeline, SpongeBob got the job just because Mr. Krabs wanted cheap labor, and his first performance was merely adequate rather than spectacular. This means Mr. Krabs treats him less like a valued employee who saved the day and more like an acceptable worker who needs significant improvement. There's less immediate trust, less recognition of SpongeBob's potential. Mr. Krabs is more critical of SpongeBob's work in the following days, always pointing out what could be done faster or more efficiently. SpongeBob still maintains his enthusiasm, but there's a subtle difference in how he's perceived at the Krusty Krab. Squidward's relationship with SpongeBob also develops differently. In the original timeline, Squidward was forced to watch SpongeBob succeed spectacularly, despite Squidward's attempts to sabotage him, which bred a certain resentful jealousy. But in this alternative timeline, Squidward was the one who had to train SpongeBob, which creates a different kind of annoyance. He feels responsible for SpongeBob's mistakes because he's the one who showed him the basics. When customers complain about slightly burned patties in those first few weeks, Squidward gets blamed too because you're supposed to be training him. This makes Squidward even more irritated with SpongeBob's presence because now SpongeBob isn't just annoying, he's actively making Squidward's job harder. Every time SpongeBob messes up, it reflects on Squidward as the trainer. The absence of that legendary first day performance also means SpongeBob doesn't immediately become a Krusty Krab legend. In the original timeline, that anchovy incident would have been talked about for years, the story of how this new kid showed up with an impossible spatula and saved the restaurant. It's part of SpongeBob's origin story at the Krusty Krab. But in this alternative timeline, SpongeBob's first day is just remembered as that crazy rush when we barely held it together. He's seen as a decent fry cook who's still learning rather than a prodigy who proved himself immediately. This affects how other characters perceive him in future interactions. When Pearl or Sandy or other characters eventually learn where SpongeBob works, they don't hear an amazing story about his first day, they just hear that he works at the Krusty Krab like a normal employee. The long-term implications are subtle but significant. SpongeBob still loves his job with the same passion he always did. He still shows up every day excited to make Krabby Patties. But there's a different energy to it. In the original timeline, he started at the absolute peak of performance and maintained that excellence. In this timeline, he started rough and had to improve gradually. He's still an excellent fry cook eventually, but he had to earn it through consistent work rather than immediate brilliance. Mr. Krabs treats him more like a regular employee who needs oversight rather than a special talent who should be treasured. This means SpongeBob faces more criticism, more nitpicking about his work, more pressure to improve his numbers. He handles it with his usual optimism, seeing every critique as an opportunity to get better, but the dynamic is definitely different. The story ends the same way in terms of Patrick coming in to order a Krabby Patty, but the reaction is completely different. SpongeBob still gets overexcited and makes way too many patties, sending them flying through the window and knocking Patrick out of the restaurant. But instead of Mr. Krabs being amused or proud of SpongeBob's enthusiasm like he might have been after the heroic anchovy rescue, he's immediately frustrated. He comes storming out, yelling about wasted patties and inventory costs and how SpongeBob needs to control himself. Squidward just smirks because he's thinking, see? This is what I've been dealing with. SpongeBob apologizes profusely, promising to be more careful, still smiling because he genuinely loves this job even when he's being yelled at. The episode ends not with celebration, but with SpongeBob cleaning up overcooked patties while humming happily to himself, still wearing that Krusty Krab hat, still proud to be part of the crew despite the rough start. It's a more grounded beginning to his career, one where he has to prove himself through persistence rather than immediate spectacular success. If you're enjoying this twisted take on SpongeBob, make sure to subscribe for more alternative timeline breakdowns. Moving on, we have Bubble Stand. In the original Bubble Stand episode, SpongeBob wakes up on a beautiful day and decides to build a bubble stand outside his house. He's hammering away loudly when Squidward pokes his head out the window and complains about all the racket, saying he can't work with that noise going on. SpongeBob agrees to be quieter and starts tapping the nails very gently, constantly checking to make sure Squidward doesn't hear. Meanwhile, Squidward sits inside playing his clarinet terribly off-key, which is way louder than SpongeBob's hammering ever was. SpongeBob finishes his stand and invites Squidward to blow bubbles for just 25 cents. Squidward scoffs at the idea, saying he would never waste time blowing bubbles and questioning who would possibly pay for such a ridiculous service. That's when Patrick emerges from under his rock and immediately wants to try. He borrows a quarter from SpongeBob, hands it back to him as payment, and tries to blow a bubble but can't figure it out. SpongeBob offers lessons for another quarter, which Patrick also borrows from him. SpongeBob then demonstrates his elaborate bubble-blowing technique involving spinning, double takes, pelvic thrusts, and bringing it around town, which produces amazing bubbles shaped like ducks, boxes, caterpillars, a tugboat, and even an elephant. Squidward comes outside furious about the noise and declares that bubble blowing is stupid and not art at all. But then he picks up the wand himself, and when SpongeBob asks for 25 cents, Squidward insists he doesn't need lessons because blowing bubbles is simple. He tries repeatedly and fails, producing only tiny bubbles that fall to the ground and pop with fart sounds. SpongeBob and Patrick try to help him with the technique, chanting about it while demonstrating, but Squidward gets annoyed. Finally, he mockingly performs the entire elaborate routine while screaming into the wand, which creates an absolutely massive bubble. Squidward is thrilled with himself and brags that it's all in his genes, not the technique. He goes back inside to play his clarinet while SpongeBob and Patrick cheer for him. But then that giant bubble floats over Squidward's house, engulfs it completely, and lifts it up toward the surface of the ocean before exploding and sending the house crashing back down. But in this alternative timeline, where SpongeBob's first day at the Krusty Krab was less spectacular and where Squidward had to train him as a regular employee, the dynamic between these neighbors has shifted in ways that completely change how this bubble stand situation plays out. By the time this episode happens, SpongeBob has been working at the Krusty Krab for a few weeks. Every single day, Squidward has had to deal with SpongeBob's over-enthusiasm at work, his constant questions, his mistakes that Squidward gets blamed for as the trainer, and Mr. Krabs criticizing both of them when things don't go perfectly. When Squidward was just dealing with SpongeBob as an annoying neighbor, he could at least escape to work and have some peace. But now SpongeBob is everywhere in his life, and Squidward is absolutely exhausted by it. So when SpongeBob starts hammering outside to build his bubble stand on what should be Squidward's day off, Squidward's reaction is far more intense than in the original timeline. He doesn't just politely ask to lower the volume. He throws open his window and yells something like, "Are you kidding me right now? I have to deal with you all week at work, and now you're ruining my one day off?" SpongeBob is genuinely confused by this outburst because he doesn't understand that he's annoying at work. He thinks he's doing great. He apologizes and says he'll be quieter, just like in the original episode. But there's a hurt look on his face now, because Squidward just said something mean about working together, and SpongeBob thought they were becoming better friends through their daily shifts together. SpongeBob starts tapping the nails very softly, but he's not as cheerful about it. He's trying to process why Squidward seems to hate working with him. Squidward goes back to playing his clarinet, but he's angrier now, so he's playing even more aggressively and off-key than usual. He's thinking about work, about how Mr. Krabs yelled at him yesterday when SpongeBob accidentally burned a batch of patties, about how SpongeBob keeps suggesting improvements to their work routine that make no sense, about how he can't even have a peaceful Saturday because that yellow menace lives right next door. When SpongeBob finishes the bubble stand and calls out asking if Squidward wants to blow bubbles, Squidward's response is harsher. He says something like, "Oh, perfect, you're trying to start another business venture. Just like how you're trying to revolutionize the Krusty Krab with your so-called innovations. No thank you." SpongeBob is even more confused because he genuinely thinks his workplace suggestions are helpful. He doesn't realize that Squidward finds them incredibly annoying. Patrick comes out just like in the original timeline and wants to blow bubbles. He borrows a quarter from SpongeBob and tries but fails. When SpongeBob offers lessons, this is where things really diverge. Squidward is watching from his window, and instead of just being mildly amused and mocking like in the original, he's actively irritated because this reminds him of work. SpongeBob is always trying to teach him the proper way to do things at the Krusty Krab, showing him his special techniques for mopping or organizing the register or greeting customers. Squidward finds these lessons condescending, even though SpongeBob means well. So when he watches SpongeBob go through that elaborate bubble-blowing routine with all the spinning and pelvic thrusts and bringing it around town, Squidward doesn't see it as silly fun. He sees it as SpongeBob being SpongeBob, always overcomplicating simple things and acting like his way is the only way. When SpongeBob blows those amazing-shaped bubbles, Squidward's annoyance grows because of course SpongeBob is good at this too. At work, despite all his mistakes and questions, SpongeBob has been getting faster at making Krabby Patties. He's improving every day, and while that should be a good thing, it bothers Squidward because it means Mr. Krabs praises SpongeBob more and criticizes Squidward for not matching his enthusiasm. The elephant bubble that floats into Squidward's house and explodes into smaller bubbles is the final straw. Squidward storms outside absolutely furious, but his anger is layered with work frustrations. He's not just annoyed about noise, he's annoyed about everything SpongeBob represents in his life right now. When SpongeBob tries to explain that they're making bubble art, Squidward's response is meaner than in the original. He doesn't just say it's not art, he says something like, "You think you're so talented at everything, don't you? You think your special techniques make you better than everyone else." Well, newsflash. SpongeBob, bubble blowing is stupid, working at the Krusty Krab is stupid, and your constant need to teach everyone your way of doing things is incredibly annoying. SpongeBob is genuinely hurt by this because he looks up to Squidward. He thought maybe they were bonding through working together. He thought Squidward was starting to like him. Patrick can tell SpongeBob is upset and tries to comfort him, suggesting they just ignore Squidward and keep having fun. But SpongeBob's enthusiasm has been dampened. He's questioning whether he really is annoying, whether his techniques really are helpful, whether he's actually any good at his job. Squidward picks up the bubble wand, and when SpongeBob weakly says that'll be 25 cents, Squidward is still in lecture mode. He goes on about how he shouldn't have to pay for something so simple, just like he shouldn't have to follow SpongeBob's special techniques at work when his own methods work fine. He pulls out a quarter and says he'll show SpongeBob that you don't need elaborate routines to accomplish simple tasks. But then Squidward tries to blow a bubble and fails repeatedly, just like in the original timeline. Each failure makes him angrier because he's trying to prove a point. He's trying to demonstrate that SpongeBob's way isn't necessary, but he can't even blow a basic bubble. This is humiliating, especially because it mirrors his experience at work, where sometimes SpongeBob's methods actually do work better than his own, which Squidward hates to admit. SpongeBob and Patrick try to help him with the technique, but their approach is different in this timeline. SpongeBob is more hesitant, more careful with his words, because he's already been told he's annoying today. He's saying things like, "If you want, maybe you could try." Instead of confidently demonstrating, Patrick is doing the movements, but SpongeBob lacks his usual enthusiasm. This actually makes Squidward more frustrated because now SpongeBob is being all sensitive and acting like a victim, when from Squidward's perspective, SpongeBob has been making his work life miserable for weeks. The whole technique chant happens, but it's more subdued, more uncertain. SpongeBob and Patrick are trying to help, but they're also trying not to make Squidward angrier. Finally, Squidward snaps and starts mockingly performing the entire routine, but there's more venom in it. He's exaggerating every movement to make it look ridiculous. He's imitating SpongeBob's voice in a mean-spirited way, and when he screams into the wand, it's a release of all his pent-up workplace frustration. The massive bubble that forms is even bigger than in the original timeline because Squidward puts so much aggressive energy into it. When the bubble forms and everyone sees how huge it is, there's a moment of stunned silence. SpongeBob and Patrick are impressed. But SpongeBob also looks a bit sad because Squidward created this amazing bubble while actively mocking him and everything he taught. Squidward's reaction to his success is interesting in this alternative timeline. He's not just proud, he's vindicated. He sees this as proof that he doesn't need SpongeBob's help, doesn't need his techniques, doesn't need his constant workplace advice. He starts bragging about how it's all in his genes, natural talent, nothing to do with the technique SpongeBob showed him. But there's an edge to it, like he's trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. SpongeBob tries to point out that Squidward did actually use the technique, that's why it worked, but Squidward isn't hearing it. He dismisses SpongeBob completely and goes back inside to play his clarinet, declaring himself a genius. The giant bubble floats over and engulfs Squidward's house just like in the original, lifting it toward the surface. But SpongeBob's reaction is different. Instead of just being concerned for Squidward's safety, he's also dealing with the emotional weight of everything that just happened. He's watching his coworker and neighbor, someone he admires and wants to be friends with, get carried away in a bubble while probably still hating him. Patrick notices that SpongeBob seems sad and asks if he's okay. SpongeBob says something like, "Do you think I'm annoying, Patrick? Do you think my techniques are stupid?" Patrick, being Patrick, doesn't really understand the deeper question and just says something simple like, "I think you're great, SpongeBob. You taught me how to blow bubbles today." The bubble explodes in the air and Squidward's house crashes back down with that violent rumbling and shaking. SpongeBob and Patrick stare in awe, just like in the original, but when they slowly walk back to their houses, SpongeBob is also processing everything. He's wondering if maybe he should tone down his enthusiasm at work, if maybe he should stop offering suggestions to Squidward, if maybe he's not as good at his job as he thought he was. When he gets inside his house, Gary can tell something is wrong. SpongeBob sits down and tells Gary about what happened, about how Squidward seems to really hate working with him. Gary meows sympathetically, and SpongeBob decides that tomorrow at work, he'll try to be more considerate of Squidward's feelings, not realizing that his mere presence is what bothers Squidward regardless of how he acts. The next morning at the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob is noticeably quieter. He's doing his job, but not with his usual over-the-top enthusiasm. He's not singing while he cooks, not suggesting improvements, not trying to chat with Squidward. Squidward initially thinks this is great, that maybe his outburst yesterday actually worked and SpongeBob finally got the message. But as the day goes on, Squidward notices that SpongeBob seems genuinely sad, and there's a tiny part of him that feels a bit guilty. Not guilty enough to apologize, because that's not who Squidward is, but guilty enough to be slightly less harsh when SpongeBob makes a small mistake with an order. SpongeBob notices this tiny bit of reduced hostility and perks up slightly, interpreting it as maybe things will be okay between them. Mr. Krabs notices the change in dynamics too. SpongeBob is quieter, more reserved, less enthusiastic about everything. This actually concerns Mr. Krabs a bit because SpongeBob's enthusiasm, while sometimes excessive, has been translating to good customer service. Customers like the happy yellow sponge, who seems genuinely excited to serve them Krabby Patties. When SpongeBob is subdued, the whole restaurant feels different. Mr. Krabs pulls SpongeBob aside and asks if everything is alright. SpongeBob, not wanting to get Squidward in trouble, just says he's trying to be more professional and less annoying. Mr. Krabs doesn't fully understand but tells SpongeBob that his enthusiasm is actually one of his strengths, which makes SpongeBob feel a bit better but also more confused about how to act around Squidward. The alternative outcome of the Bubble Stand episode ripples into their working relationship in complex ways. Squidward's house survived the bubble incident with some damage, and he spent the rest of his day off doing repairs while grumbling about SpongeBob. But he also can't completely deny that the technique SpongeBob taught did result in an amazing bubble, even if he'll never admit it out loud. SpongeBob is more careful around Squidward now, more aware that his personality can be overwhelming to others. He still loves his job and still wants to be Squidward's friend, but he's approaching it more cautiously. Patrick doesn't really understand what happened, but continues to be a supportive friend to SpongeBob, reminding him that he's good at blowing bubbles and making Krabby Patties and being himself. The bubble stand itself stays up for a few more days, but SpongeBob doesn't actively promote it. When neighbors walk by and ask about it, he offers bubble-blowing services quietly, without the enthusiastic salesmanship he showed before. Some of the joy has been taken out of it because the whole thing is now associated with that fight with Squidward. Eventually, Patrick suggests they should do the technique together and make more cool bubble shapes, and SpongeBob agrees because Patrick's encouragement helps him remember why he built the stand in the first place, to spread joy and fun through bubble art. They spend the afternoon creating elaborate bubble shapes while Squidward watches from his window, conflicted between his annoyance at the noise and his secret fascination with the impressive bubbles they're making. If you're enjoying this twisted take on SpongeBob, make sure to subscribe for more alternative timeline breakdowns. Moving on to pizza delivery. In the original pizza delivery episode, it's after closing time at the Krusty Krab, and SpongeBob is cleaning tables while Squidward impatiently wants to go home. The phone rings and a customer orders a pizza, even though the Krusty Krab doesn't make pizza. Mr. Krabs, seeing dollar signs, smashes some Krabby Patties into a pizza shape, boxes it up, and tells Squidward he has to deliver it. Squidward suggests SpongeBob should do it instead, but Mr. Krabs tells him to take SpongeBob along. SpongeBob is incredibly excited about making delivery history with the first Krusty Krab pizza ever. They get in the boat, but SpongeBob can't drive because he's still in boating school, so Squidward tells him to just back it up since it's supposedly around the corner. SpongeBob backs up so fast and so far that they end up in the middle of nowhere by morning and run out of gas. When Squidward kicks the boat in frustration, it drives away without them, leaving them stranded. They walk through the desert with SpongeBob singing the Krusty Krab pizza song while Squidward complains. SpongeBob tries pioneer tricks he saw in movies like listening to the ground for trucks and using moss to find civilization, but Squidward doesn't trust him and goes the opposite direction, even though SpongeBob was pointing the right way. They get caught in a tornado, nearly starve, and Squidward tries to trick SpongeBob into letting him eat the pizza. Finally, SpongeBob finds a boulder and rides it like the pioneers supposedly did, getting them to the customer's house. But when they deliver the pizza, the customer gets furious because he didn't get his Diet Dr. Kelp drink, even though he never ordered one. He throws the pizza in SpongeBob's face and slams the door. SpongeBob breaks down crying, which makes Squidward so angry that he marches back and slams the pizza in the customer's face, then lies to SpongeBob saying the customer ate the whole thing and was satisfied. But in this alternative timeline where SpongeBob and Squidward's relationship has been strained by weeks of working together with Squidward having to train him, this delivery adventure takes on a completely different tone from the very beginning. It's after closing time and both of them are exhausted from another long shift. SpongeBob has been trying extra hard all day to not annoy Squidward after that bubble stand incident a few days ago, where Squidward yelled at him about being annoying at work. He's been quieter, more reserved, asking fewer questions, trying to anticipate what needs to be done without being told. Squidward has noticed this change, and while part of him appreciates the reduced chatter, another part of him feels that vague guilt that's been nagging him since the bubble incident. When the phone rings, SpongeBob leaps for it with some of his usual enthusiasm, because answering phones is one task he knows he's good at, but Squidward snatches it first out of habit. SpongeBob falls to the floor looking disappointed, and Squidward feels that guilt flicker again, but pushes it down. After Mr. Krabs takes the order and creates the makeshift pizza, he assigns Squidward to deliver it. When Squidward suggests SpongeBob should do it instead, there's a different energy to it. In the original timeline, Squidward was just trying to get out of work. But in this alternative timeline, Squidward is actually thinking that maybe this would be good for SpongeBob, a chance for him to do something independently without Squidward breathing down his neck, criticizing everything. Mr. Krabs still says to take SpongeBob along, but Squidward's reaction is more resigned than annoyed because of course he can't escape SpongeBob even after hours. Outside by the boat, SpongeBob does his vehicle inspection routine, but it's more subdued. He's still thorough and still checks everything, but he's not as enthusiastically narrating each step. He's learned over the past few weeks that Squidward finds his constant commentary annoying. When he says they're making history with the first Krusty Krab pizza ever, his voice has excitement but also a careful quality, like he's testing whether Squidward will snap at him for being too enthusiastic. Squidward just sighs and tosses SpongeBob the keys, telling him to drive since it's supposedly just around the corner. SpongeBob immediately says he can't because he's still in boating school, and there's genuine anxiety in his voice. At work over the past few weeks, he's been making mistakes and getting corrected constantly. The last thing he wants is to mess up driving and give Squidward another reason to be frustrated with him. Squidward insists it's easy, and SpongeBob should just do what he does in school. SpongeBob reluctantly agrees, and the whole backing up sequence happens similarly to the original, but with different internal dynamics. When SpongeBob can't figure out reverse and the words transform into Korean characters in his mind, he's panicking not just about driving, but about disappointing Squidward again. When they back up wildly through the night and end up in the middle of nowhere by morning, SpongeBob feels terrible. Squidward's reaction is harsher than in the original, because this fits the pattern he's experienced at work, where SpongeBob tries hard, but things still go wrong. When Squidward realizes they're out of gas and stranded in the middle of nowhere, he doesn't just complain about the situation. He makes comments about how, of course, this happened, how SpongeBob can't even do simple tasks without creating disasters. SpongeBob suggests they can still deliver it on foot, and there's a desperate quality to it. He needs to prove he can complete this delivery successfully. He needs to show Squidward that he's competent at something. As they walk through the desert, SpongeBob starts singing the Krusty Krab pizza song, but it's quieter at first, almost like he's trying to keep his own spirits up rather than entertaining them both. He keeps glancing at Squidward to gauge his reaction. When Squidward complains about his feet hurting, SpongeBob stops singing immediately because he doesn't want to add to Squidward's irritation. He tries that pioneer trick of listening to the ground for trucks, and when he says he saw it in a movie once, Squidward's response is more cutting. He makes some comment about how SpongeBob believes everything he sees in movies, how that's probably why he thought working at the Krusty Krab would be glamorous when it's actually just exhausting work made worse by incompetent coworkers. SpongeBob flinches at that but tries to stay positive. When the hitchhiking attempt fails and the truck nearly runs him over, Squidward's concern is brief, before it turns into anger about how SpongeBob almost got them both killed with another stupid pioneer trick. They continue walking, and SpongeBob eventually starts singing again because he can't help himself. The song keeps him going. But he's singing more to himself than to Squidward, like a personal mantra. The Krusty Krab pizza really does mean something to him. He genuinely loves his job despite all the criticism and mistakes and Squidward's constant irritation. Squidward hears this and it bothers him in a way he can't quite articulate. There's something admirable and infuriating about SpongeBob's inability to let go of his enthusiasm even when everything is going wrong. When they get caught in the intense winds and SpongeBob gets carried away while clutching the pizza, the exchange between them is more emotionally charged in this timeline. Squidward yells at him to let go of the stupid pizza, and SpongeBob screams back that it's for the customer. When Squidward shouts, "Who cares about the customer?" and SpongeBob responds, "I do." There's real conviction in his voice. This is what he's been trying to prove for weeks at work, that he does care, that he's trying his best even when he messes up. When SpongeBob gasps, "Squidward!" in shock at hearing Squidward doesn't care about customers, it's not just surprise, it's genuine hurt because that goes against everything SpongeBob believes about their job. The tornado sequence happens similarly, but when Squidward screams at SpongeBob to hang onto the pizza, there's a shift. Squidward realizes in that moment that SpongeBob's dedication, while annoying, is also admirable. After they crash land and Squidward demands to know where the road is and how they'll get home, SpongeBob's pioneer knowledge about moss pointing to civilization is delivered with less confidence than in the original. He's been wrong about things before, been criticized for his ideas, so when he suggests they go the direction the moss indicates, he's half expecting Squidward to reject it. And Squidward does reject it, choosing to go the opposite direction while making sarcastic comments about trusting pioneer wisdom from someone who can't even drive a boat forward. SpongeBob watches him go and feels that familiar sinking feeling of being doubted, but he heads the direction he thinks is right anyway while carrying the pizza. As SpongeBob walks alone singing his pizza song variations, he's processing everything. The beatboxing, the different musical styles, the increasingly exhausted versions of the song, they're not just entertaining, they're how he's coping with another situation where things went wrong and Squidward blamed him. When they eventually reunite, both exhausted and lying face down in the sand, the dynamic is different. Squidward is starving and desperate, but there's also a growing awareness that maybe he shouldn't have gone his own way, that maybe SpongeBob was right about the direction. When Squidward demands they eat the pizza, SpongeBob's refusal is more emotional. He says they promised it to the customer, but there's also an undertone of this being the one thing he's managed not to mess up on this delivery. He has successfully protected this pizza through all these disasters, and that matters to him. The sequence where Squidward tries to trick SpongeBob into opening the box and tempting him with the pizza's appearance plays out similarly, but when SpongeBob catches on to what Squidward is doing and runs away protecting the pizza, there's desperation in it. This pizza represents his ability to do his job correctly. If he lets Squidward eat it, then this whole disastrous delivery means nothing. When SpongeBob finds the boulder and excitedly declares they're saved, his joy is genuine but also tinged with relief. He can finally prove he can complete this delivery. When he talks about how pioneers rode these rocks for miles and climbs on top to drive it, Squidward's rant about how the pioneers were lousy and that's why they're all gone feels more personal in this timeline. He's not just mocking pioneer wisdom, he's mocking everything SpongeBob has been using to navigate this disaster, and by extension, mocking SpongeBob's approach to everything, including work. But then the rock actually works, and they make it to the customer's house. SpongeBob is so excited, so proud that they completed the delivery despite everything going wrong. He rings the doorbell with that huge smile, giving Squidward a thumbs up, and for a moment Squidward almost smiles back because they did actually make it despite all odds. Then the customer asks where his drink is. SpongeBob is confused because there was no drink ordered. When the customer starts yelling about how he can't eat pizza without his diet doctor, kelp. SpongeBob tries to explain that it wasn't on the order, but his voice is shaky. He's faced criticism and anger before, from Squidward, from Mr. Krabs when things go wrong, but this feels different. He worked so hard to protect this pizza, to get it here, to do this one thing right. When the customer screams, "Didn't you ever once think of the customer?" It hits SpongeBob especially hard in this alternative timeline because thinking of the customer is the one thing he knows he does well. That's what he's been holding on to through all his workplace mistakes and Squidward's criticism, the knowledge that he genuinely cares about making customers happy. To have a customer tell him he doesn't think about them, to throw the pizza in his face, breaks something in him. When the customer slams the door and SpongeBob walks over to Squidward shaking and trying not to cry, he's not just upset about this one delivery. He's processing weeks of feeling inadequate at work, of knowing he annoys Squidward, of trying so hard and still failing. Squidward watches SpongeBob drop the pizza box and fall over sobbing, and something shifts. He's seen SpongeBob make mistakes at work and brush them off with optimism. He's seen SpongeBob face his criticism and complaints and still show up excited the next day. But this is different. This is SpongeBob genuinely broken by someone telling him he doesn't care about customers, when caring about customers is core to who he is. Squidward feels that guilt from the bubble stand incident flood back, along with guilt about every harsh comment he's made over the past few weeks. SpongeBob isn't crying because the delivery failed, he's crying because his identity as someone who cares has been attacked. When Squidward grabs the pizza and marches to the customer's door, it's not just about defending SpongeBob from a rude customer. It's Squidward finally acknowledging what he's seen throughout this entire nightmare delivery, that SpongeBob genuinely does care, that his dedication isn't just annoying enthusiasm, but actual commitment to doing his job right. When Squidward slams the pizza in the customer's face and says, "This one's on the house," he's defending SpongeBob in a way he hasn't before. He comes back and lies to SpongeBob about the customer eating the whole thing in one bite with no drink, and when SpongeBob asks "no drink?" with that hopeful smile, Squidward confirms it. SpongeBob's relief and happiness is genuine. He needed to hear that the customer was satisfied, that he did succeed at his job. As they ride the rock back to the Krusty Krab with SpongeBob declaring they have just enough time to make it back to work, Squidward's final complaint about his aching tentacles is less harsh than it might have been at the start of this delivery. Something changed during this journey. He saw SpongeBob's unwavering dedication to completing the delivery correctly, his willingness to face tornado winds and starvation rather than compromise on his commitment to the customer. It doesn't make Squidward suddenly like SpongeBob or enjoy working with him, but there's a new understanding. When they get back to work the next day, Squidward is still irritated by SpongeBob's questions and enthusiasm, but there's a subtle difference. He's a bit less harsh with his corrections, a bit more willing to acknowledge when SpongeBob does something right. SpongeBob notices this change and feels like maybe, just maybe, he and Squidward are starting to understand each other a little better. If you're enjoying this twisted take on SpongeBob, make sure to subscribe for more alternative timeline breakdowns. Moving on to Squidville. In the original Squidville episode, SpongeBob and Patrick are playing with a reef blower right outside Squidward's house early in the morning. The noise and chaos drive Squidward absolutely crazy as he tries to sleep. He screams at them through his window about how he wishes he could live somewhere far away from them, somewhere without all their noise and stupidity. The reef blower then malfunctions and explodes, completely destroying Squidward's house and leaving only the foundation. When Squidward goes to look at real estate options, he discovers Tentacle Acres, an entire gated community populated exclusively by other octopi who are just like him. Everyone there plays clarinet, rides bikes, eats canned bread, and appreciates interpretive dance. It's Squidward's dream come true. He immediately moves in and revels in finally being surrounded by sophisticated neighbors who understand him. At first, everything is perfect. He wakes up to the sound of synchronized alarm clocks instead of reef blowers. His neighbors greet him politely, everyone follows the same refined routine. He plays clarinet with a group, rides his bike in formation with others, and enjoys activities that he considers cultured and intelligent. But slowly, Squidward realizes that Tentacle Acres is boring. Everyone is exactly the same. There's no variation, no spontaneity, no surprise. Every day is identical to the last. When he tries to suggest different activities or break from the routine, the other residents give him strange looks. Eventually, Squidward snaps from the monotony and starts going crazy, acting out by blowing bubbles and doing wild activities that remind him of SpongeBob. The other residents are horrified and kick him out of Tentacle Acres. He ends up back in Bikini Bottom, and when he sees SpongeBob and Patrick playing outside his damaged house, he actually smiles. He's genuinely happy to see them because he realizes that their chaos, while annoying, made life interesting. The episode ends with him accepting that maybe living next to SpongeBob isn't the worst thing in the world. But in this alternative timeline where Squidward and SpongeBob's relationship has been shaped by working together daily, where Squidward trained SpongeBob and witnessed his dedication during the pizza delivery, this entire Squidville situation plays out with much more emotional complexity. It's been a few months since SpongeBob started working at the Krusty Krab. The morning when SpongeBob and Patrick are playing with the reef blower outside Squidward's house, Squidward's frustration is layered with workplace exhaustion. He's not just being woken up by annoying neighbors, he's being woken up by his coworker, who he's going to have to see in a few hours for another shift. He throws open his window and yells at them, but his complaints include things like, "Don't you ever take a break from being annoying? I deal with you all day at work and now this." SpongeBob, who's been trying to be less annoying since the bubble stand incident and has been more careful around Squidward at work, looks genuinely hurt. He didn't realize Squidward could hear them playing. He apologizes, which makes Squidward feel that familiar guilt, but he's too tired and angry to care. When the reef blower explodes and destroys Squidward's house, SpongeBob is horrified. He and Patrick accidentally destroyed their coworker's home. SpongeBob immediately runs over, asking if Squidward is okay, offering to help fix it, suggesting Squidward can stay at his house while repairs are done. But Squidward, standing in the ruins of his home, just glares at SpongeBob and says something like, "You've already ruined my life at work. Now you've literally destroyed my house. I can't do this anymore. I need to get away from you." SpongeBob tries to apologize again, but Squidward walks away. This is different from the original timeline, where Squidward just saw SpongeBob as an annoying neighbor. In this timeline, SpongeBob represents everything frustrating about Squidward's current life situation. His job isn't glamorous, it's exhausting. He has to train someone who makes constant mistakes. He can't escape even at home. When Squidward discovers Tentacle Acres, it's not just an escape from annoying neighbors, it's an escape from his entire life situation. Squidward moves into Tentacle Acres with even more enthusiasm than in the original timeline because he's not just leaving SpongeBob the neighbor, he's leaving behind everything SpongeBob represents, including the job where he has to work with him. He imagines never having to train anyone again, never having to answer SpongeBob's questions, never having to hear that laugh or see that buck-toothed smile. At first, Tentacle Acres is everything he dreamed. The synchronized alarm clocks feel peaceful compared to SpongeBob's foghorn. The polite neighbors who keep to themselves feel refreshing after months of SpongeBob trying too hard to befriend him. The structured activities feel sophisticated compared to bubble blowing and reef blowers. Squidward settles into the routine, and for the first few days, he feels genuine relief. He's not responsible for training anyone. He's not being blamed when someone else makes mistakes. He can just exist as himself without having to deal with anyone else's problems. But then the routine starts to feel less comforting and more suffocating. Every morning is identical. Every neighbor says the same polite greetings. Everyone plays clarinet at the same skill level, which means there's no standout performances, no variation, just synchronized mediocrity. When Squidward tries to add a little flair to his clarinet playing during a group session, the others don't appreciate it. They just look at him strangely like he's disrupting the routine. He starts to notice that nobody here really talks to each other beyond pleasantries. There's no conversation, no connection, no personality. Everyone is so identical that they're almost like background characters in their own lives. Squidward finds himself missing something, but he can't quite identify what it is. He tells himself he's just adjusting, that this is still better than living next to chaos. During a bike ride with the other residents, everyone is cycling in perfect formation at the exact same speed. Squidward tries to go a bit faster or suggests taking a different route, but the others just maintain their pace and follow their usual path. He thinks about how SpongeBob would probably do something ridiculous on a bike ride, maybe try to ride backwards or sing a song about bicycles, or find some way to turn a simple activity into an adventure. Squidward shakes his head, trying to clear that thought. Why is he thinking about SpongeBob? This is exactly what he wanted to escape. But the thought lingers. At least when SpongeBob made mistakes at work, there was something happening. There was variation, unpredictability, moments of surprise, even if they were usually annoying surprises. The breaking point comes during one of the group activities when Squidward realizes he can predict exactly what everyone will do and say. It's like living in a loop. Nobody challenges him, nobody annoys him, but nobody engages with him either. He thinks about how at work, SpongeBob was always asking questions, always wanting to learn, always treating Squidward like his opinion mattered even when Squidward was harsh with him. The pizza delivery comes to mind, how SpongeBob refused to give up on delivering that pizza, how he sang that stupid song the entire journey, how his dedication was annoying but also kind of admirable. Squidward realizes that SpongeBob's persistence, his enthusiasm, his refusal to be discouraged, made every day different even when it was frustrating. Squidward starts to feel trapped in Tentacle Acres. The sameness that initially felt peaceful now feels like it's crushing him. Everyone here is sophisticated and cultured like him, but they're also passionless and disconnected. Nobody cares about anything enough to be annoying about it. Nobody tries hard enough to make mistakes. Nobody has enough personality to clash with anyone else. It's sterile perfection and it's driving him crazy. He thinks about how SpongeBob cares so much about his job that he protected a pizza through a tornado. He thinks about how SpongeBob kept singing even when exhausted because music made him happy. He thinks about how SpongeBob built a bubble stand just to share something he loved with others. Squidward realizes that what he interpreted as annoying enthusiasm was actually passion, something nobody in Tentacle Acres seems to have. One day, Squidward just snaps. He can't take another identical morning, another synchronized bike ride, another evening of polite clarinet playing. He grabs a bottle of bubble solution he finds somewhere and starts blowing bubbles wildly, laughing and doing that stupid technique. SpongeBob taught him spinning and pelvic thrusting and bringing it around town. The other residents are shocked and horrified. They tell him this behavior is inappropriate, that he's disrupting the community, that if he can't conform to their standards, he needs to leave. Squidward realizes these people aren't his peers. They're just versions of what he pretended to be, stuffy and boring and afraid of anything spontaneous. He's been so busy trying not to be annoying like SpongeBob that he forgot how to be anything at all. When Squidward gets kicked out and returns to Bikini Bottom, his house has been somewhat repaired through insurance or basic reconstruction. It's still standing on the same spot next to SpongeBob's pineapple. As Squidward approaches, he sees SpongeBob outside watering his lawn or tending to his garden. SpongeBob notices Squidward and his face lights up with that familiar smile. But then he catches himself, and the smile becomes more cautious. He waves tentatively and says something like, "Oh, hi Squidward. Welcome back. I'm sorry again about your house." There's genuine remorse in his voice and a carefulness that wasn't there before, like he's afraid of making Squidward angry again. Squidward looks at SpongeBob and feels a complicated mix of emotions. He's still annoyed by that buck-toothed smile and high-pitched voice. He still knows that living next to SpongeBob means chaos and noise and constant interaction, but he also realizes that SpongeBob is real in a way nobody in Tentacle Acres was real. SpongeBob feels things deeply, cares about things genuinely, lives life with actual passion, even when that passion manifests in annoying ways. Squidward doesn't quite smile, but his expression softens. He says something like, "Yeah, well, try to keep the noise down in the mornings." Some of us need sleep before work. It's still a complaint, but there's less venom in it than before. SpongeBob's face brightens because this sounds like normal Squidward, the coworker he knows, not the furious Squidward who left saying he needed to escape. SpongeBob asks when Squidward will be back at the Krusty Krab because Mr. Krabs has had Squidward's shifts covered, but things aren't the same without him. Squidward is surprised to hear this, surprised that his absence was noticed, surprised that things felt different without him there. He tells SpongeBob he'll be back for the next scheduled shift. As he heads into his house, Patrick emerges and waves enthusiastically, and instead of getting angry, Squidward just sighs and waves back briefly before going inside. The next day at work, SpongeBob is noticeably happy that Squidward is back. He's still being careful not to annoy him too much, but there's an ease to their interaction that wasn't there before Squidward left. When SpongeBob asks a question about proper spatula technique, Squidward answers with his usual irritation, but also actually answers instead of just dismissing the question. When SpongeBob makes a small mistake, Squidward corrects him but without the same harsh edge. Something shifted during Squidward's time away. He's not suddenly best friends with SpongeBob, he still finds him annoying, but there's an acceptance now. He understands that SpongeBob's enthusiasm and imperfections are part of a personality that's at least genuine and alive. During their lunch break, SpongeBob mentions that he was really worried when Squidward left, that he thought maybe he'd driven Squidward away permanently. Squidward is uncomfortable with this emotional honesty, but he manages to say something like, "You're annoying, SpongeBob, but I've dealt with worse. At least you actually care about the job and the customers. That counts for something." It's probably the nicest thing Squidward has ever said to him, and SpongeBob looks like he might cry from happiness. Squidward immediately tells him not to make a big deal out of it, but there's a subtle change in their dynamic from this point forward. They still clash at work. SpongeBob still makes mistakes that frustrate Squidward. Squidward still complains about SpongeBob's enthusiasm and questions, but underlying their interactions is a new understanding. Squidward knows now that living in a world without SpongeBob's chaos means living in a world without passion or authenticity. SpongeBob knows that Squidward's criticism, while harsh, comes from someone who actually stayed and came back rather than permanently escaping. When they're closing up the Krusty Krab that evening, SpongeBob suggests they walk home together since they're neighbors. Squidward initially refuses, but then reluctantly agrees. As they walk, SpongeBob starts humming the Krusty Krab pizza song under his breath. Squidward tells him that song is stupid and he never wants to hear it again. SpongeBob grins because he knows Squidward is lying, that somewhere deep down Squidward remembers that delivery and how they survived it together. Squidward doesn't smile back, but he doesn't walk away either, and that's progress in this complicated coworker-neighbor relationship they've developed. If you're enjoying this twisted take on SpongeBob, make sure to subscribe for more alternative timeline breakdowns. Moving on, we have Artist Unknown. In the original Artist Unknown episode, Squidward is excited to teach an art class at the Adult Learning Center, dreaming of being called Professor Tentacles and having museum wings named after him. When the class time arrives, everyone outside thinks it's a cooking class and leaves, except for SpongeBob, who's genuinely excited to take art lessons. Squidward is disappointed that SpongeBob is his only student but decides to teach him anyway. He starts by making SpongeBob repeat demeaning phrases like, "I have no talent," and "Mr. Tentacles has all the talent." When Squidward tries to teach him to draw a circle, SpongeBob instead draws a perfect circle by first drawing a detailed realistic head and then erasing the features. Squidward is amazed but dismissive. SpongeBob then creates Rippy Bits art from torn paper scraps, which Squidward also dismisses. When they move to sculpture, SpongeBob hits the marble once and creates a perfect replica of Michelangelo's David. Squidward is stunned by its beauty but claims it needs his nose to be real art, ruining the sculpture's perfection. SpongeBob breaks down crying, thinking he's a terrible artist who doesn't deserve Squidward's teaching, and throws himself into a dumpster. Art collector Monty P. Moneybags arrives and sees the sculpture, declaring the artist will have fame and fortune. Squidward takes credit, but the sculpture breaks when they try to move it. Squidward finds SpongeBob at the dump and brings him back, trying to get him to recreate the masterpiece. But now SpongeBob can only follow the rules from the art book and can't create anything good. SpongeBob fails repeatedly, and Squidward has a breakdown, smashing marbles everywhere. In his rage, he accidentally creates an even better sculpture without realizing it. He leaves, and Monty declares the janitor a genius artist. But in this alternative timeline, where Squidward and SpongeBob have been working together for months, where they survived the pizza delivery together, where Squidward left for Tentacle Acres and came back with a new appreciation for authenticity and passion, this art class situation unfolds with completely different emotional layers. It's been several weeks since Squidward returned from Tentacle Acres. Things at work have settled into a rhythm where Squidward is still frequently annoyed by SpongeBob, but there's an underlying acceptance now. They're not friends exactly, but they're coworkers who understand each other better than before. When Squidward signs up to teach the art class at the Adult Learning Center, he's genuinely excited about it. This is his chance to share something he's truly passionate about, separate from the Krusty Krab, separate from fry cooking and cash registers and customer complaints. On the morning of the first class, Squidward arrives early to set everything up. He's imagining teaching sophisticated students who will appreciate his artistic knowledge, people who aren't SpongeBob. When he opens the door and everyone outside leaves because they thought it was cooking class, he's devastated. But then he sees SpongeBob standing there, and his heart sinks for different reasons than in the original timeline. In this version, Squidward's first thought isn't just annoyance at having SpongeBob as a student. He's thinking about how he can't escape SpongeBob anywhere, how his one activity outside of work is now connected to work, how he wanted this to be his space and now it's invaded. SpongeBob is excited to be taking a class with Squidward, seeing it as another opportunity to learn from someone he admires. He says something like, "This is great. We can spend even more time together outside of work," which makes Squidward die a little inside. When SpongeBob asks where the teacher is and Squidward reveals it's him, SpongeBob's reaction is genuinely enthusiastic, but also layered with their work relationship. He says something like, "You're teaching? That makes sense. You're always teaching me things at the Krusty Krab. Now I can learn about art from you too." Squidward sighs because this is both flattering and exhausting. At work, teaching SpongeBob is an obligation he resents. Here, teaching was supposed to be something he chose to do, something prestigious, and now it's just more of the same, but he decides to make the best of it. At least SpongeBob actually wants to learn, which is more than he can say for most people. The repeat after me section happens differently. Instead of making SpongeBob say he has no talent, Squidward starts more professionally because he's trying to be an actual teacher here, not just SpongeBob's annoyed coworker. He explains basic art principles, talks about the importance of technique and studying the masters. SpongeBob is taking notes enthusiastically, nodding along, treating this like a real class. But then SpongeBob raises his hand and asks if Squidward could teach him the same way he teaches at work, with hands-on examples and step-by-step guidance. Squidward grimaces because he was trying to avoid work-style teaching, but he agrees to demonstrate. When Squidward draws his crooked circle and asks if he's going too fast, there's less mockery in it than in the original. He's genuinely trying to teach at an appropriate pace. When SpongeBob shows his perfect circle, Squidward is amazed but also immediately suspicious. He's worked with SpongeBob for months now and knows that SpongeBob is good at specific things but terrible at others. How can someone who burns patties and forgets orders create a perfect circle? He demands to see the process, and when SpongeBob draws the detailed head and erases it down to a circle, Squidward is both impressed and frustrated. He thinks about how at work, SpongeBob sometimes solves problems in the most backwards, complicated ways that somehow work. This is the same thing. SpongeBob's method makes no sense but produces perfect results. Squidward crumples the paper, but not with the same dismissiveness as the original. There's a conflict in him because part of him recognizes this is actually impressive, but another part insists it's wrong because it doesn't follow proper artistic methods. When SpongeBob creates the Rippy Bits collage from the torn paper, Squidward looks at it and has a moment of flashback to Tentacle Acres, to the identical octopi who followed all the rules and created nothing interesting. SpongeBob's chaotic method created something that actually has character and life to it. But Squidward can't admit this out loud because he's supposed to be the teacher, the expert. He asks SpongeBob if he actually wants to learn art or just mess around, and SpongeBob apologizes sincerely, saying he does want to learn. The marble sculpture sequence is where things really diverge. When SpongeBob creates the perfect Michelangelo's David with one tap of the chisel, Squidward stares at it in stunned silence. A tear actually falls from his eye, not just from beauty, but from the realization that SpongeBob, his annoying coworker who can't drive a boat and makes constant mistakes at work, just created something more beautiful than anything Squidward has ever made. There's a long pause where Squidward is processing this. He thinks about the pizza delivery, about how SpongeBob protected that pizza through impossible conditions with dedication Squidward didn't think was possible. He thinks about Tentacle Acres, about how everyone there was technically skilled but soulless. And now he's seeing that SpongeBob has something Squidward doesn't have, some natural talent or instinct that can't be taught. When Squidward snaps out of his reverie and criticizes the sculpture, saying it's not art because it needs more time and should follow the rules, his voice is harsher than it needs to be. He's lashing out because he's jealous and insecure. When he adds his nose to the sculpture claiming now it's art, SpongeBob looks at it and his face crumples. But in this alternative timeline, SpongeBob's breakdown is more emotional because of their work history. He's not just crying about failing at art, he's crying about disappointing Squidward again. He talks about how he came here to learn, how he thought maybe outside of work he could do something right, how he should have known he'd mess this up too, just like he messes things up at work. He says he doesn't deserve Squidward's tutoring, that Squidward already has to put up with him all day at the Krusty Krab, and now he's ruined Squidward's art class too. SpongeBob throws himself out the window into the dumpster, and Squidward stands there feeling terrible. He knows he just destroyed SpongeBob's confidence over jealousy. He knows the sculpture was perfect before he added his nose. He knows he's being a bad teacher and a worse coworker. When Moneybags arrives and asks about the sculpture, Squidward tries to show his own work first, desperate to prove he's the real artist here. When Monty rejects Bold and Brash by saying it belongs in the trash, Squidward feels that familiar humiliation he's felt so many times in his life. But then Monty sees SpongeBob's sculpture and declares it the work of a genius. Squidward's face goes through a journey of emotions. He wants the fame and fortune desperately. He thinks about how unfair it is that SpongeBob, who he's had to train at work, who makes constant mistakes, who drove him to Tentacle Acres, somehow created this masterpiece. When the sculpture breaks while they're moving it, Squidward feels relief and guilt simultaneously. Relief that he doesn't have to admit SpongeBob is more talented, guilt because he knows he ruined something beautiful out of jealousy. When Monty asks him to create another one and Squidward promises to have something better tomorrow, he's making a desperate promise he knows he can't keep. After Monty leaves, Squidward realizes he has to find SpongeBob and get him to recreate the sculpture, but the thought fills him with shame because he's about to use SpongeBob again after just crushing him emotionally. At the dump, when Squidward finds SpongeBob hiding in a cereal box, the interaction is more complicated. SpongeBob doesn't just think he failed at art, he thinks he's failed at everything. He talks about how his hands only destroy, referencing mistakes at work, the reef blower destroying Squidward's house, everything that's gone wrong between them. When Squidward tries to convince him to come back and try again, SpongeBob is suspicious because he's been through enough with Squidward to know when he's being manipulated. He asks why Squidward suddenly believes in him when just an hour ago he was saying SpongeBob had no talent. Squidward has to actually try to be convincing, saying things about how every artist has moments of brilliance, and SpongeBob clearly has natural ability. It's partially manipulation, but there's also truth in it that Squidward is uncomfortable admitting. Back at the classroom, when Squidward tries to get SpongeBob to recreate the sculpture, the failure hits differently. SpongeBob can only draw crooked circles and follow the book's rules now because Squidward spent the whole class telling him that proper art follows rules and techniques. Squidward basically trained SpongeBob to suppress his natural creativity the same way he's been training him at work to follow specific procedures. When Squidward tries to undo this by ripping up the book and telling SpongeBob to forget the rules, SpongeBob just puts the book back together because rules and structure are what he was taught. Squidward realizes he destroyed SpongeBob's artistic instinct by being a controlling teacher, the same way he's probably been stifling SpongeBob's creativity at work with constant corrections and criticism. The marble tapping sequence where SpongeBob goes through increasingly ridiculous preparation methods is SpongeBob trying desperately to recapture whatever he had before, but it's gone. When he finally taps the marble, and it crumbles into rubble, then adds Squidward's nose, saying, "Now it's art. It's almost cruel in its innocence." SpongeBob genuinely thinks this is what Squidward wanted, a sculpture that follows the rules and has Squidward's influence. Squidward's breakdown is more than just frustration about not getting the sculpture. It's the culmination of months of complicated feelings about SpongeBob. The jealousy over natural talent, the guilt over crushing that talent, the frustration of working together, the grudging respect from their shared experiences, the shame of using SpongeBob for personal gain. He smashes the marbles in a cathartic rage that's about everything, not just this one art class. When SpongeBob sees Squidward destroying everything, he misinterprets it as artistic passion being too much to contain. He says something like, "I understand, Squidward. Sometimes at work, I get so excited about making Krabby Patties that I can barely contain myself. Your art must feel the same way." He puts the cereal box over himself and heads back to the dump singing. And there's a sadness to it, because he thinks he's failed at yet another thing and driven Squidward to a breakdown. As he runs away, Squidward is too consumed by his rage to stop him or explain. He keeps smashing marbles, destroying art supplies, channeling months of frustration into physical destruction. When Monty returns and sees the accidental masterpiece Squidward created in his rage, Squidward has already left. He doesn't see what he made. He doesn't know that his emotional breakdown produced something beautiful. He just knows he failed to manipulate SpongeBob into saving his chance at fame and fortune. The janitor gets credit for the sculpture, and Squidward walks home in defeat. The next day at work, SpongeBob shows up still believing he's terrible at art and that he ruined Squidward's class. He's extra careful and quiet, trying not to be another disappointment. Squidward comes in exhausted and defeated, having lost his chance at artistic recognition. They work their shift in uncomfortable silence, both processing the previous day's events in their own ways. Eventually, during their lunch break, SpongeBob tentatively asks if Squidward is okay. Squidward snaps that he's fine, then pauses and actually says something honest. He admits that SpongeBob's sculpture was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, that adding the nose ruined it, that he was jealous. SpongeBob is shocked by this honesty. He says he didn't know Squidward thought it was beautiful, that he would have never destroyed it if he'd known. Squidward explains that's why he destroyed it, out of jealousy, and that he's sorry for crushing SpongeBob's confidence. It's probably the first real apology Squidward has given him. SpongeBob tears up a little and says maybe they could do art together sometime, not as teacher and student, but just as two people creating. Squidward says maybe, though he doesn't sound convinced, but there's a possibility there that wasn't there before, an acknowledgement that they both have value even if it manifests differently. If you're enjoying this twisted take on SpongeBob, make sure to subscribe for more alternative timeline breakdowns. Moving on to Band Geeks. In the original Band Geeks episode, Squidward is practicing clarinet at home when the doorbell rings. People from the pet hospital say they heard a dying animal, implying his clarinet playing sounds terrible. Then Squidward gets a phone call from Squillium Fancy Son. his rival from band class who now leads a fancy band and is supposed to play at the Bubble Bowl. Squillium can't make it and mockingly asks if Squidward's band can cover, knowing Squidward doesn't have a band. Squidward's pride kicks in and he lies, claiming he does have a band that will play the Bubble Bowl. After hanging up, Squidward panics and puts up posters all over Bikini Bottom recruiting people for a marching band with promises of fulfillment, adoration, and free refreshments. Everyone shows up for practice, but nobody has any musical experience. Patrick asks if mayonnaise is an instrument. The brass, wind, and drum sections all sound terrible. Over the next few days, practice is a disaster. Flag twirlers crash into a blimp and die. Plankton can't play harmonica. They sound awful, no matter what Squidward tries. On the final practice night, a massive fight breaks out with band members using instruments as weapons. After everyone leaves, Squidward has a breakdown, telling them they crushed his one chance at happiness and to not bother showing up because he'll just say they died in a marching accident. SpongeBob then rallies everyone with a speech about helping Squidward like he's helped them, even though the examples don't actually involve Squidward. They practice on their own. At the Bubble Bowl, Squidward expects disaster and Squillium shows up to watch him fail. But miraculously, the band performs Sweet Victory perfectly with SpongeBob singing, stunning everyone. Squilliam has a heart attack and gets carried away while Squidward celebrates his triumph. But in this alternative timeline, where Squidward and SpongeBob have months of complicated work history behind them, where they've survived disasters together, where Squidward has learned to grudgingly appreciate SpongeBob's dedication even when it's annoying, this band geek's situation unfolds with much deeper emotional stakes. It's been a couple weeks since the art class incident where Squidward admitted he was jealous of SpongeBob's natural talent and actually apologized. Things at work have been tentatively better. They're not friends, but there's less hostility. Squidward still gets irritated by SpongeBob's enthusiasm, but he's been making an effort to be slightly less harsh with his criticism. SpongeBob has been trying to give Squidward more space while still maintaining his natural optimism. When Squidward gets the call from Squillium Fancyson, bragging about his fancy band and the Bubble Bowl performance, all those old insecurities come flooding back. Squillium represents everything Squidward wishes he was, successful and respected and living his dreams. When Squillium mockingly asks if Squidward's band can cover for them, Squidward's mind immediately goes to work. He thinks about how SpongeBob always has that irritating optimism, how despite being terrible at so many things, SpongeBob somehow pulled off miracles like that pizza delivery and that perfect sculpture. If SpongeBob can do impossible things, maybe Squidward can pull off having a band. His pride won't let him admit to Squillium that he's just a cashier at the Krusty Krab with no band and no prospects. So he lies, claims he has a band, and promises they'll play the Bubble Bowl. After hanging up, Squidward's panic is more intense than in the original timeline because he's thinking about who he can recruit. He knows SpongeBob will want to help, because SpongeBob is always trying to help and be supportive, but asking SpongeBob for help feels complicated after everything that's happened between them. Still, he puts up the recruitment posters all over town. When practice time comes and everyone shows up, Squidward immediately notices SpongeBob in the crowd. SpongeBob waves enthusiastically and Squidward feels that familiar mix of gratitude and dread. He's grateful someone reliable showed up, but he also knows SpongeBob's enthusiasm can be a double-edged sword. When Squidward asks who has played musical instruments before, and Patrick asks if mayonnaise is an instrument, SpongeBob doesn't just sit there silently like in the original. He raises his hand and says something like, "I've watched you practice clarinet through my window lots of times. Does that count as experience?" Squidward's eye twitches because this is both sweet and creepy and very SpongeBob. When Squidward says he has enough talent for everyone, there's a different edge to it. He's trying to convince himself as much as them, trying to prove he can lead something successfully, unlike his failures at work where Mr. Krabs is always in charge and SpongeBob somehow stumbles into success despite mistakes. The initial practice attempts are disasters just like in the original, but Squidward's frustration is layered with work stress. Every time someone plays badly or doesn't understand instructions, he's reminded of training SpongeBob at the Krusty Krab, of explaining things over and over, of watching people fail at simple tasks. When the drummers blow on their sticks and pin Squidward to the wall, he says, "Too bad that didn't kill me," with real despair in his voice, because this band represents his one chance to prove he's more than just a fry cook supervisor, and it's already falling apart. Over the following practice days, SpongeBob tries really hard. He's not naturally musical, but he's determined to help Squidward succeed, because he's seen how much Squidward needs this. During the marching practice, when the flag twirlers spin too hard and crash into the blimp, killing all three of them, SpongeBob looks horrified. He whispers to Patrick something like, "Remember when we accidentally destroyed Squidward's house with the reef blower? I think we just made things worse for him again. Squidward lies on the ground in fetal position, not just from the disaster, but from the weight of everything. This was supposed to be his triumphant moment, and people are literally dying because his band is so incompetent. On day 4, the final practice night, when Squidward suggests playing loud to seem good and they blow out all the windows, his face doesn't just get deformed from the noise. He's having a mental breakdown. Everything he touches fails. His art gets rejected, his band is terrible, his rival is successful, while he's stuck at the Krusty Krab. When Harold and Mr. Krabs start fighting about big meaty claws, SpongeBob tries to intervene differently than in the original. He says something like, "Come on, we've all worked together at some point. Mr. Krabs, you know Harold as a customer. We can work together." But then someone insults SpongeBob, calling him talking cheese, and the fight escalates. Everyone starts using instruments as weapons. Missus, Puff slams people with cymbals, Sandy chases Patrick with a trumpet. When class ends and everyone starts to leave, Squidward slams the door open and delivers his crushing speech. But in this alternative timeline, it hits different. He says, "Well, you did it. You took my one chance at happiness and crushed it. Crushed it into little tiny bite-sized pieces." But then he looks directly at SpongeBob and his voice cracks a bit because SpongeBob represents everything complicated about his life. He says, "I really expected better of you people. I guess I'm a loser for that too. Don't bother showing up tomorrow. I'll just tell them you all died in a marching accident. So thanks for nothing." As he leaves crying, he's not just upset about the band. He's processing months of feeling inadequate, of working with SpongeBob, who somehow succeeds despite failing, of trying to be something more than what he is. After Squidward leaves, the room is silent. Patrick says, "You're welcome," obliviously. But then SpongeBob stands up and his face is serious in a way it rarely is. He says, "What kind of monsters are we?" But instead of giving the original speech about Squidward being there when convenient, SpongeBob's speech is personal and real. He talks about their actual shared experiences. He says something like, "Squidward trained me at the Krusty Krab when he didn't have to. When we got stranded in the desert, delivering that pizza and I wanted to give up, Squidward kept going. When I ruined his house with the reef blower, he came back to Bikini Bottom anyway. When I thought I had no talent at art, he came to find me at the dump. Squidward is always there even when he doesn't want to be, even when we annoy him, even when he complains the whole time. We owe him this." The speech resonates differently because it's based on actual events people might have heard about. Larry says, "Yeah, I heard about that pizza delivery. That was crazy," Sandy says, and Squidward did come back from that fancy octopus neighborhood instead of staying there. Harold adds, "And firemen are pretty great too. Still not quite getting it, but going along." SpongeBob continues, "So if we can all just work together and actually try our hardest, we can make Squidward proud. We can give him this one thing he wants so badly. We can show him that even when things seem impossible, even when you've failed at everything else, sometimes you can still succeed. Aoni, Atwo, a skiddly diddly do." The band stays late into the night. They practice on their own without Squidward there to criticize them. SpongeBob leads them through the songs, and something magical happens. Without the pressure of Squidward's expectations and harsh corrections, people start to find their rhythm. Patrick discovers he's actually good at drums when nobody's yelling at him. Sandy's guitar skills from her Texas days come back. Plankton finds a keyboard and realizes he can actually play it better than harmonica. They work through the night, determined to do this for Squidward not because he deserves it, but because they can see he needs it. The next day at the Bubble Bowl, Squidward arrives alone, expecting to have to cancel. He's rehearsing excuses in his head, dreading the humiliation. Then he sees Squillium and screams, because of course Squillium would show up to watch him fail. When Squillium asks where his band is, Squidward says they died, and he almost believes it himself because the way practice went, metaphorical death seems accurate. But then Squillium points and there's SpongeBob and the entire band. Squidward's eyes actually pop out of his head in shock, not just that they came, but that they came back after he screamed at them and told them not to bother. SpongeBob walks up and says, "We're ready to perform, Squidward," with that eager face that Squidward usually finds annoying. But right now, Squidward sees it differently. That's not just eager enthusiasm. That's SpongeBob showing up for him despite everything. Squilliam laughs at how the band looks and Squidward explains that's his eager face with resignation, expecting disaster. As they march into the Bubble Bowl, Squidward thinks this is the last time he can show his face in town. SpongeBob says, "That's the spirit, Squidward," trying to keep things positive even though he can tell Squidward is terrified. When they reach the field and see the live-action crowd of humans, everyone is shocked. Patrick comments on the ugly fish, SpongeBob wonders if they're in a toxic waste dump, Mr. Krabs feels sick. The pressure is enormous. Squidward looks at his band of misfits and then glances at Squillium, who's grinning and bouncing his unibrow mockingly. Squidward raises his baton nervously and counts them in. 1, 2, 3, 4. He expects catastrophe. He closes his eyes, bracing for the awful sounds. But then the brass section plays a perfect fanfare intro. Squidward's eyes snap open in shock. Plankton plays the opening keyboard notes flawlessly. And then SpongeBob starts singing Sweet Victory, but his voice isn't SpongeBob's voice. It's powerful and professional. Throughout the performance, everyone is playing perfectly. Patrick on drums wearing sunglasses, Sandy shredding guitar, Mrs. Puff on bass, Mr. Krabs on keytar, Pearl on saxophone. It's legitimately amazing. Squidward stares in disbelief as his terrible band performs like professionals. When SpongeBob sings, and it's sweet, sweet, sweet victory, yeah. Squidward looks at Squillium and sees his rival's face frozen in shock. Squidward allows himself a small, genuine smile and throws his baton over his shoulder, conducting with just his arms in pure joy. When he sees Squillium having a heart attack and being carried away on stretchers, Squidward waves goodbye smugly, but there's also a moment where he looks back at his band, at SpongeBob singing his heart out, at Patrick drumming enthusiastically, at everyone giving their all for him. The performance continues perfectly, and when it ends with Squidward jumping in the air in triumph, freezing mid-jump, there's a different emotional resonance to it in this alternative timeline. Back in the original, it was a surprise victory, but in this version, it's a victory earned through genuine growth and complicated relationships. SpongeBob and the others didn't just pull off a miracle performance for laughs. They did it because they understood what Squidward needed and they cared enough to deliver it. After the Bubble Bowl, back at work the next day, Squidward comes in and SpongeBob is at the grill humming Sweet Victory under his breath. Squidward pauses, and for once he doesn't immediately criticize. He says, you guys were. Good job yesterday. It's awkward and uncomfortable for him to give praise, but he means it. SpongeBob lights up and says, we just wanted you to have your moment. Squidward, you've been teaching me stuff since I started here, so it felt good to give something back. Squidward nods stiffly and goes to his register. Mr. Krabs comes out and mentions he heard about the Bubble Bowl performance, asking if the band wants to play at the Krusty Krab sometime. Squidward immediately says no, that was a one-time thing. But he glances at SpongeBob and adds, but it was a good one-time thing. SpongeBob treasures that small acknowledgement because he knows how hard it is for Squidward to admit anything positive. Their relationship going forward isn't transformed into friendship, but there's a deeper layer now. They've accomplished something meaningful together. When they clash at work, which they still do regularly, there's an unspoken understanding underneath it. They know they can pull off the impossible when they really need to. The Sweet Victory performance becomes a shared memory that both of them think about during their worst shifts when everything goes wrong. It's proof that sometimes, despite all the failures and frustrations and personality clashes, things can work out perfectly. If you're enjoying this twisted take on SpongeBob, make sure to subscribe for more alternative timeline breakdowns. Moving on to Squillium Returns. In the original Squillium Returns episode, Squidward is finishing his shift at the Krusty Krab, complaining about how one day he'll make something of his life and never set foot in this grease trap again. He walks outside and immediately encounters Squilliam Fancison, his rich, successful rival from high school, bragging about his private yacht and private island. Squidward tries to hide his Krusty Krab uniform, but Squilliam spots him on his lunch break. When Squilliam asks what Squidward has accomplished since high school, Squidward panics and lies, claiming he owns a 5-star restaurant. Squilliam says he and his group will come visit tonight. Squidward freaks out and begs Mr. Krabs to help him transform the Krusty Krab into a fancy restaurant for one night. Mr. Krabs agrees because he wants to impress Squilliam too. They recruit Patrick as hat check guy, and Mr. Krabs volunteers to be chef, but he's terrible at cooking fancy food. SpongeBob is assigned to be the waiter and given a book on how to become a fancy waiter in less than 20 minutes. SpongeBob memorizes everything, but his brain becomes completely overloaded. Squidward tells him to empty his mind of everything except fine dining and breathing. Inside SpongeBob's brain, little brain workers throw away all his memories and knowledge. With his mind blank except for fine dining, SpongeBob transforms the restaurant perfectly, decorating it beautifully and serving customers with incredible sophistication. Squilliam arrives and is amazed. SpongeBob treats him like royalty with perfect service. Squidward makes Squilliam admit over the loudspeaker that Squidward has the fanciest restaurant and doesn't suck eggs. Everything is going perfectly until Squilliam asks SpongeBob his name. SpongeBob can't answer because he deleted his name from his brain along with everything else. He has a mental breakdown, starts attacking customers with soup and cheese graters, and chaos erupts. The restaurant falls apart, everyone runs away screaming, and Squidward has to admit he's just a cashier and the whole thing was fake. Squillium cruelly reveals he was lying about being poor like Squidward and leaves in his balloon casino while Squidward sits in defeat. But in this alternative timeline where Squidward and SpongeBob have this complex shared history where they've survived impossible situations together like the pizza delivery and band geeks performance, this Squillium situation becomes emotionally heavier from the start. It's been a couple weeks since the band geeks' triumph at the Bubble Bowl. That performance was Squidward's proudest moment, the one time he actually succeeded at something artistic and impressive. He's been riding that high, feeling like maybe his life isn't completely pathetic. When he finishes his shift at the Krusty Krab and walks outside still in his uniform, he's less bitter than usual, because at least he has that Bubble Bowl victory to feel good about. Then he sees Squilliam Fancison bragging to a group about his private yacht and private island, and all that confidence evaporates instantly. Squilliam represents a different kind of success than the Bubble Bowl, the kind that comes with money and status and recognition from high society rather than just one good performance. When Squilliam spots Squidward trying to hide his Krusty Krab hat and makes that comment about being on lunch break, Squidward's first instinct is to mention the Bubble Bowl. He starts to say something like, "Actually, I recently performed at the Bubble Bowl with my band." But Squilliam cuts him off, asking what he's accomplished since high school in general, and suddenly the Bubble Bowl seems small and insignificant. One good performance doesn't erase years of working at a fast food restaurant. When Squilliam reveals he leads a big fancy band and already played the Bubble Bowl previously as a regular gig, it completely diminishes Squidward's achievement. What was Squidward's greatest triumph is just another Tuesday for Squilliam. Squidward's brain is racing through his options. He thinks about mentioning SpongeBob's incredible performance, but that would mean admitting SpongeBob was the real star. He thinks about his art, but Monty P. Moneybags rejected Bold and Brash, and the sculptures that succeeded weren't even his. He's left with nothing that sounds impressive to someone like Squilliam. So when Squilliam mockingly asks if Squidward is a cashier, Squidward snaps and lies about owning a 5-star restaurant. The lie feels bigger in this timeline because Squidward knows what it's like to actually succeed through teamwork at Band Geeks, and he's consciously choosing to lie about solo success instead. When Squilliam says they'll all come tonight, Squidward's face goes through that extreme shock reaction because he's thinking about logistics. The Band Geeks' performance worked because everyone came together and practiced, and SpongeBob rallied them. Can he pull off that same miracle at the Krusty Krab in a few hours? Back at Mr. Krab's office, when Squidward is begging for help, his desperation is different. He's not just worried about being exposed as a loser, he's worried about losing the tiny bit of confidence he gained from Band Geeks. He needs this to prove that success wasn't a one-time fluke. Mr. Krabs agrees to help when he hears Squilliam's name, but there's an added layer because Mr. Krabs remembers how the band situation worked out and figures maybe Squidward can pull off another miracle. When Squidward is assigning positions to SpongeBob, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs, there's a different dynamic. He looks at SpongeBob and thinks about Band Geeks, about how SpongeBob rallied everyone and made the impossible happen. But he also remembers the art class where SpongeBob's natural talent made him jealous, and the pizza delivery where SpongeBob's dedication was both admirable and frustrating. Squidward is torn between wanting SpongeBob's help because he knows SpongeBob can do amazing things, and resenting that he needs SpongeBob's help at all. When he assigns SpongeBob to be the waiter, his voice has this conflicted tone. He says, "I can't believe I'm saying this, but SpongeBob, you're going to have to be the waiter," with emphasis on having to rely on SpongeBob again. SpongeBob takes the book about becoming a fancy waiter and promises to memorize every page down to the punctuation marks. There's eagerness in his voice because he wants to help Squidward succeed again like they did at the Bubble Bowl. He's seen Squidward's vulnerable side now, seen him break down and admit he needs help, and SpongeBob wants to be there for him. When SpongeBob's brain becomes overloaded and he explodes saying he can't do it, Squidward's reaction is more panicked than in the original. He's thinking this is exactly what happened before Band Geeks when everyone was terrible at practice and he thought it was hopeless. But then SpongeBob rallied everyone and made it work. Squidward needs that SpongeBob magic again. The scene where Squidward tells SpongeBob to empty his mind takes on new significance in this timeline. Squidward says, "I want you to empty your mind of everything that doesn't have to do with fine dining and breathing." But as he's saying it, he's thinking about all the things SpongeBob would be deleting. Their shared experiences, the pizza delivery where SpongeBob protected that pizza through impossible conditions, the art class where SpongeBob created something beautiful, the Band Geeks performance where SpongeBob sang perfectly. All of that is about to be erased, so SpongeBob can focus solely on being a fancy waiter. There's a moment where Squidward almost stops himself because he realizes he's asking SpongeBob to sacrifice everything that makes him SpongeBob just to save Squidward's pride. But Squidward doesn't stop. His need to impress Squillium overrides his concern for SpongeBob. Inside SpongeBob's brain, when the supervisor orders everyone to dump everything that isn't about fine dining, the mini brain workers are throwing away memories that matter more in this timeline. They're dumping files labeled Pizza Delivery with Squidward, Sweet Victory Performance, Art Class, Working at Krusty Krab. One mini brain worker hesitates holding a file marked Squidward's friendship, and another worker yells, "Boss said everything goes," and throws it in the furnace. They're destroying months of shared experiences and growth, leaving SpongeBob as just a blank slate programmed for fancy waiting. When SpongeBob emerges with that blank expression and Squidward asks how he feels, SpongeBob just drools. Squidward feels a pang of guilt seeing SpongeBob reduced to this empty shell, but then Squillium arrives and Squidward has no choice but to go forward. When they enter the transformed restaurant and see that SpongeBob has made everything perfect, the decorations and atmosphere and professional setup, Squidward is amazed but not entirely surprised. He's seen SpongeBob pull off miracles before. What surprises him is how different SpongeBob seems. At Band Geeks, SpongeBob was still enthusiastically himself while performing. Here, SpongeBob is refined and sophisticated but completely devoid of his usual personality. It's unsettling. SpongeBob's service is flawless. He seats everyone perfectly, gives Squillium the royal treatment with the shoulder massage and feeding and cologne and brushing. When he explains the Krabby Newberg with that detailed, sophisticated description, Squidward watches and thinks, this isn't really SpongeBob anymore, this is just a fancy waiter program running in SpongeBob's body. When Squillium says the food is fantastic and SpongeBob salutes with all 6 hands, there's something mechanical about it. Squidward tells SpongeBob he can't thank him enough, and SpongeBob responds, "Fine dining and breathing are all I know how to do, with no warmth, no recognition of their relationship, nothing." It's exactly what Squidward asked for, but it feels wrong. Still, it's working. Squillium is impressed. Squidward makes him read the card about Squidward tentacles having the fanciest restaurant and not sucking eggs. He makes Squillium wear the foam finger and speak into the microphone. This is Squidward's vindication moment, and it feels incredible. Squillium admits defeat, praises the restaurant, and specifically compliments the brilliant waiter. Then comes the fatal question that Squidward should have anticipated but didn't. Squillium asks SpongeBob his name. The question seems simple, but Squidward's face goes pale because he suddenly remembers what he did. He told SpongeBob to empty his mind of everything except fine dining and breathing. That would include his name. SpongeBob's name is tied to his identity, his memories, his relationships, everything Squidward told him to delete. When SpongeBob stammers, "Beef Wellington?" and then the fork on the left, Squidward tries to play it off as joking, but inside he's panicking. He's watching SpongeBob's brain literally break, trying to find information that no longer exists. When SpongeBob can't answer and starts glitching, throwing soup on armpits and slamming faces into food and grating someone's butt with cheese, Squidward feels responsible in a way he didn't in the original timeline. In the original, SpongeBob was just a helpful coworker who followed instructions. But in this alternative timeline, SpongeBob is someone Squidward has shared impossible experiences with, someone who's been there for him repeatedly, despite Squidward's constant criticism and harsh treatment. And Squidward just asked him to delete all of that, to erase months of growth and connection, just to impress Squillium for one night. The chaos erupting around them feels like karma. Patrick runs out tied up screaming. Mr. Krabs warns about the appetizer monster. Customers flee through windows and doors. The fancy wallpaper rips off, revealing the Krusty Krab underneath. Squidward's tuxedo rips and his cashier uniform appears in its place. When Squillium asks, "Well, Squiddy, I'm waiting," and Squidward has to admit he's just a cashier and this was all fake. The confession hurts more because he knows SpongeBob sacrificed his mind to make this happen, and it still wasn't enough. When Squilliam cruelly reveals he lied about being poor and leaves in his balloon casino, Squidward sits in the ruins of the restaurant feeling worse than usual. He used SpongeBob, literally erased SpongeBob's memories and personality, and it was all for nothing. SpongeBob walks by with ice on his head, asking what's going on, and the fact that SpongeBob doesn't even remember what just happened makes it worse. Squidward says, "Oh, the usual," but his voice is hollow. The next day at work, SpongeBob shows up for his shift acting normally because his brain has recovered, but he has no memory of the previous night's events. He doesn't remember the fancy restaurant or serving Squillium or going crazy. When Squidward tries to explain what happened, SpongeBob is confused. He says, "I helped you with a fancy restaurant? That sounds fun. Did it work?" Squidward has to tell him it didn't work, and SpongeBob is disappointed but optimistic, saying, "Well, maybe next time." The fact that SpongeBob doesn't remember any of it, doesn't remember how Squidward used him and asked him to erase everything important, bothers Squidward more than it should. There's no consequences for SpongeBob, no hurt feelings or resentment, because he has no memory of it. But Squidward remembers. He remembers asking SpongeBob to delete their shared experiences, and he has to live with that. Over the following days, Squidward notices little things. Sometimes SpongeBob will start to mention band geeks or the pizza delivery, and then pause like he's not quite sure of the details. He'll say, "Remember when we performed at that big bowl place?" instead of confidently recounting the Bubble Bowl triumph. Or he'll say, "Didn't we deliver something together once?" When the pizza delivery used to be a vivid memory he'd reference, Squidward realizes that when SpongeBob dumped everything from his brain, some of those memories didn't fully restore. The brain workers threw files into furnaces and toilets, and some of that information is just gone. SpongeBob's recollection of their shared experiences is hazier now, and it's Squidward's fault. This creates a subtle shift in their dynamic. SpongeBob is still optimistic and enthusiastic at work, still makes the same mistakes, and asks similar questions. But sometimes Squidward will make a reference to something they went through together, expecting SpongeBob to remember, and SpongeBob just looks confused. Like Squidward might say, "At least this isn't as bad as that tornado during the pizza delivery," and SpongeBob responds, "We were in a tornado?" with genuine uncertainty. Each time this happens, Squidward feels that guilt again. He damaged SpongeBob's memory for his own selfish pride, and SpongeBob doesn't even know it happened or hold it against him. Mr. Krabs notices the change too. He comments that SpongeBob seems to have forgotten some basic procedures they established months ago, things he used to know. Squidward has to retrain SpongeBob on certain tasks, and while SpongeBob learns them again with his usual enthusiasm, Squidward knows these are things SpongeBob already learned before Squidward told him to empty his mind. It's like partial amnesia, specific memory gaps around their shared experiences, and Squidward is responsible. When SpongeBob cheerfully says, "It's like learning new things every day," Squidward thinks bitterly that it's more like relearning old things because Squidward asked him to delete them. The relationship between them continues, but with this underlying guilt that Squidward carries. He's still annoyed by SpongeBob's enthusiasm and still criticizes his mistakes, but now there's an added layer of responsibility. Squidward knows he used SpongeBob's willingness to help, and asked him to sacrifice something irreplaceable, his memories and identity, for a scheme that failed anyway. SpongeBob doesn't remember or resent it, but Squidward does. Every time SpongeBob tries to be helpful or optimistic, despite not remembering why he trusts Squidward, it's a reminder of what Squidward took from him. The Squillium returns incident becomes another shared experience they went through together, except this time only Squidward remembers it fully, and that knowledge weighs on him in ways SpongeBob will never understand. If you're enjoying this twisted take on SpongeBob, make sure to subscribe for more alternative timeline breakdowns. Moving on, we have Employee of the Month. In the original Employee of the Month episode, SpongeBob proudly displays his 26 consecutive Employee of the Month awards in his house. He's won every single month and takes immense pride in this achievement. At the Krusty Krab, Squidward initially doesn't care about the award at all. He sees it as meaningless corporate nonsense and watches SpongeBob celebrate without any interest. But then Squidward looks at the wall of Employee of the Month photos and realizes every single picture is SpongeBob. Not once in over 2 years has Squidward won. This suddenly bothers him deeply. His competitive side emerges and he decides he's going to win. Employee of the Month this time, breaking SpongeBob's streak. When Squidward declares his intention to compete, SpongeBob is initially supportive, but quickly realizes Squidward is serious competition. What starts as friendly rivalry escalates into obsessive madness. They both stay up all night trying to get to the Krusty Krab first to prove their dedication. They sabotage each other repeatedly, setting traps, blocking roads, and doing increasingly unhinged things to gain an advantage. By morning, they're both exhausted, filthy, and have destroyed property in their competitive frenzy. When they finally reach the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs is horrified by their behavior and the destruction they caused. The episode typically ends with them learning that their obsessive competition ruined everything, and the award either goes to someone else or gets canceled entirely. The lesson is about how unhealthy competition can destroy relationships and make you lose sight of what actually matters. But in this alternative timeline, where Squidward and SpongeBob have this complicated shared history, spanning months of working together, surviving impossible situations, and developing a complex mentor-trainee relationship with layers of respect, resentment, guilt, and grudging appreciation. This Employee of the Month competition unfolds very differently from the start. It's been about a week since the Squillium returns incident. Squidward is still dealing with guilt over asking SpongeBob to erase his memories, and he's been noticing SpongeBob's fuzzy recollection of their shared experiences. SpongeBob is his usual enthusiastic self at work, but sometimes pauses when trying to remember specific details about things they did together. The dynamic between them is more complicated than simple coworker annoyance now. When SpongeBob comes to work one morning excited about potentially winning his 27th consecutive Employee of the Month award, his enthusiasm is different in this timeline. He talks about how this award represents not just good work, but also everything Squidward taught him when training him. He says something like, "I couldn't have won all these without your training, Squidward. You made me the employee I am today." This comment hits Squidward in a complicated way. On one hand, it's acknowledgement that Squidward contributed to SpongeBob's success. On the other hand, it's a reminder that SpongeBob succeeded despite Squidward's often harsh training methods, and SpongeBob doesn't even remember some of those training sessions anymore because of the memory deletion. Squidward looks at the Employee of the Month wall and sees SpongeBob's face repeated 26 times. In the original timeline, this was just annoying. But in this alternative timeline, Squidward has complex feelings about it. He trained SpongeBob, so those awards are partially his achievement by proxy. But he's also never been recognized himself, despite working at the Krusty Krab longer than SpongeBob, despite being the one who taught SpongeBob the job. Despite surviving the pizza delivery and helping with band geeks and dealing with SpongeBob's mistakes and enthusiasm every single day, when Squidward mentions that he's never won Employee of the Month, SpongeBob looks genuinely surprised. He says, "Really? Never? But you've worked here so much longer than me." There's no mockery in his voice, just honest surprise that his trainer and coworker has never received recognition. This moment is what triggers Squidward's decision to compete, but his motivation is different than in the original. It's not just about ego or suddenly caring about a meaningless award. It's about wanting recognition for all the work he's done, including training the person who keeps winning. It's about proving he has value beyond being SpongeBob's supervisor. It's about showing that he deserves acknowledgement too. When Squidward declares he's going to win Employee of the Month this time, SpongeBob's reaction is conflicted. Part of him wants to be supportive, because Squidward has been there for him in important ways he's starting to remember. But another part of him feels protective of his streak, because these awards represent his identity as a good employee. SpongeBob tries to be encouraging, saying things like, "That's great, Squidward. May the best employee win." But there's an edge of nervousness to it. Squidward picks up on this and feels that familiar irritation. Even when SpongeBob tries to be nice, it comes across as condescending, like SpongeBob is so confident in his superiority that he can afford to be gracious. This bothers Squidward more than outright mockery would. As their shift continues that day, they both become hyper-aware of each other's work performance. Squidward is trying to be the perfect employee, greeting customers warmly, keeping his register organized, even attempting to smile. SpongeBob is working at his usual high-energy pace but keeps glancing over at Squidward to see how he's doing. Mr. Krabs notices the change in dynamics and is initially pleased. He comments that it's nice to see Squidward actually trying for once, putting effort into customer service and workplace enthusiasm. But there's something uncomfortable about how both employees keep watching each other, measuring, comparing. When closing time comes and they're cleaning up, Squidward casually mentions he might come in early tomorrow to get a head start on work. SpongeBob immediately says he was planning to come in early too. They exchange a look that's both competitive and understanding. They both know what's happening here, a competition is forming, but neither wants to be the first to acknowledge how serious it's becoming. That night, SpongeBob can't sleep. He's thinking about his 26 awards and what they mean. They're proof he's good at his job, proof that Squidward's training worked, proof that he matters. If Squidward wins this month, it doesn't erase SpongeBob's streak, but it feels like it would diminish it somehow. He gets up and decides to head to the Krusty Krab early to show his dedication. Meanwhile, Squidward is also awake, thinking about how he's worked at the Krusty Krab for years before SpongeBob even applied, how he trained this person who now surpasses him in recognition, how maybe winning Employee of the Month would validate all those years of unappreciated work. He decides to head to the Krusty Krab early too. When they both arrive at the Krusty Krab in the middle of the night and see each other, there's a moment of surprise, followed by understanding. SpongeBob says, "I just wanted to get an early start on prep work." Squidward responds, "Same here." They stare at each other for a moment and then both rush for the door. The competition has officially begun, but it's different from the original timeline's chaotic sabotage. They're both trying to outwork each other rather than destroy each other. SpongeBob starts prepping ingredients with incredible speed and precision. Squidward organizes the dining area perfectly and preps the register. They're both doing excellent work, but they're doing it competitively, constantly checking to see what the other is accomplishing. As the night progresses, the competition escalates, but in a more psychological way. SpongeBob makes a comment about how he learned to prep ingredients so efficiently from watching Squidward during training, which is both a compliment and a reminder that SpongeBob took Squidward's methods and perfected them. Squidward responds by mentioning how he's been at the Krusty Krab much longer and knows tricks SpongeBob hasn't learned yet. They're verbally sparring while working, each trying to assert their superiority. The conversation eventually turns to their shared experiences. SpongeBob brings up the pizza delivery, saying, "Remember how dedicated we were getting that pizza to the customer? That's the kind of dedication Employee of the Month requires." Squidward counters with, "I remember that delivery better than you do," which is a subtle reference to SpongeBob's memory gaps that SpongeBob doesn't fully understand. The competition gets more intense as dawn approaches. They start trying to outdo each other in increasingly elaborate ways. SpongeBob creates an elaborate display of condiments arranged artistically. Squidward reorganizes the entire stockroom with perfect efficiency. SpongeBob washes windows until they're spotless. Squidward details the cash register until it shines. They're both exhausted, but driven by something deeper than just wanting an award. For SpongeBob, this is about proving his worth and maintaining his identity as a good employee. For Squidward, this is about finally getting recognition after years of being overlooked, about proving he's more than just SpongeBob's bitter coworker. Around 4 a.m., they both collapse from exhaustion in the dining area, sitting at separate tables catching their breath. There's a long silence where they both process what they're doing. SpongeBob speaks first, saying, "Why is this so important to you, Squidward? You've always said you hate working here." Squidward is quiet for a moment before responding with something honest. "Because I've never been recognized for anything here. You have 26 awards. I have nothing. I trained you and you surpassed me in every way, and everyone just sees me as the grumpy cashier." SpongeBob looks genuinely sad hearing this. He says, "But you've been recognized. You led the band at the Bubble Bowl. Everyone cheered for you. That was amazing." Squidward is caught off guard by this reference. He remembers Band Geeks vividly, remembers the triumph, but he responds, "That was one night, one performance. You win Employee of the Month every single month consistently. That's sustained excellence. That's what I've never had." SpongeBob absorbs this and admits, "I didn't know it bothered you. I like doing good work. These awards make me feel like I'm succeeding at something." They sit in that understanding for a moment, both recognizing that they're competing for similar reasons, both wanting validation and recognition. The moment is interrupted when they hear someone approaching. They both panic, thinking it's Mr. Krabs coming early, and they scramble to look busy. But it's not Mr. Krabs. It's the morning delivery person dropping off supplies. After the delivery person leaves, SpongeBob and Squidward look at each other and something shifts. The competitive energy is still there, but it's less hostile. They've both worked incredibly hard through the night, and they're both exhausted. SpongeBob suggests they could both just present their best work to Mr. Krabs and let him decide fairly rather than continuing to sabotage their own health. Squidward is surprised by this mature approach but agrees. They spend the remaining hours before opening, finishing their prep work, still working hard but no longer in direct competition. They're both putting forward their best effort and leaving the judgment to Mr. Krabs. When Mr. Krabs arrives and sees how much work has been done, he's initially impressed. Both the kitchen and dining area are perfectly prepped, everything is organized. The restaurant looks better than it has in months. But then Mr. Krabs notices how exhausted SpongeBob and Squidward look. They're both swaying on their feet, eyes bloodshot, clothes disheveled from working all night. He asks what happened, and they both try to explain they were competing for Employee of the Month. Mr. Krabs' expression changes from impressed to disappointed. He says something like, "So, ye destroyed your health and probably did thousands of dollars in overtime work I'll have to pay for, all for a $5 plaque?" SpongeBob and Squidward both deflate, realizing he has a point. Mr. Krabs gives them a lecture about how Employee of the Month is meant to recognize consistent good work during regular hours, not obsessive competition that leads to burnout. He points out that their competitive behavior could have damaged equipment or caused safety issues. He mentions that their regular work is what actually matters, not grand gestures done in the middle of the night. Both SpongeBob and Squidward feel embarrassed because they got so caught up in competing that they lost sight of what the award actually meant. Mr. Krabs then makes a decision. He says neither of ye are getting Employee of the Month this month. This behavior doesn't deserve recognition. SpongeBob and Squidward both protest, but Mr. Krabs is firm. Instead, Mr. Krabs gives the award to the fry cook from the night shift who consistently does good work without needing recognition or engaging in competitions. SpongeBob is devastated, his 26-month streak is broken. Squidward is disappointed but also somewhat relieved. When their shift finally starts and they're working together, exhausted and awardless, there's a different energy between them. SpongeBob admits he got too obsessed with maintaining his streak and lost perspective. Squidward admits he let his need for recognition override his common sense. They both acknowledge they pushed too hard and ended up with nothing. Later during their lunch break, they're sitting together in exhausted silence. SpongeBob says, "I'm sorry you've never won Employee of the Month. You really do deserve recognition for all the work you do here." Squidward is uncomfortable with direct compliments but manages to say, "You deserved those 26 awards. Even if it's annoying to admit it, you're good at this job. I trained you well." SpongeBob smiles at that, the acknowledgement that his success is partially due to Squidward's training. Then SpongeBob adds, "Even though I can't remember all of our training sessions, I know you taught me important stuff. Thank you for that." This hits Squidward with guilt again because he knows why SpongeBob can't remember everything, but he just nods in acknowledgement. The rest of their shift is quieter than usual. They're both tired and processing the night's events. When closing time comes, they clean up together in relative peace. As they're leaving, SpongeBob says maybe next month we could both try our best without competing directly. Just do good work and see what happens. Squidward agrees, though he's not entirely convinced this will prevent future competition. The competitive element is still there between them, but it's tempered now by understanding and exhaustion. They've learned that obsessive competition destroys more than it builds. Over the following weeks, they both continue working hard, but without the same intense rivalry. SpongeBob is trying to win back his Employee of the Month status, but he's not doing it obsessively. Squidward is putting in solid work, but accepting that SpongeBob will probably always be better at the enthusiastic customer service aspect. When the next Employee of the Month is announced and it goes back to SpongeBob, Squidward doesn't spiral into jealous rage. He just sighs and says, "Congratulations," with minimal bitterness. SpongeBob accepts the award but doesn't celebrate as exuberantly as before. He's learned that awards are nice, but they're not worth destroying himself or his relationships over. The Employee of the Month incident becomes another layer in their complicated relationship. It's a reminder that competition between them can quickly become unhealthy, that they both have insecurities about recognition and worth, and that sometimes the pursuit of validation causes more problems than it solves. They continue working together with their usual dynamic of annoyance and grudging respect, but now, with the added understanding that they're both capable of taking things too far when recognition is on the line. If you're enjoying this twisted take on SpongeBob, make sure to subscribe for more alternative timeline breakdowns. Moving on to Dying for Pie. In the original Dying for Pie episode, Squidward wakes up from a dream of being on a tropical island, only to be disturbed by SpongeBob's voice. He arrives at work exhausted and indifferent, driving a boat with a bumper sticker that says, "Don't ask me about my day." Mr. Krabs announces it's Employee Brotherhood Day and they need to exchange gifts. SpongeBob presents Squidward with a handmade sweater featuring a heart with Squidward's face on it, made from SpongeBob's own eyelashes. Squidward is disgusted and throws it back. Mr. Krabs insists Squidward must make a gift too, according to the rules. Frustrated, Squidward sees some pirates outside the Krusty Krab selling pies and buys one for $25, not realizing the pirates were being literal when they said the pies were made in a bomb factory. Mr. Krabs accidentally discovers it's actually a bomb when a piece explodes in milk. They rush back to find SpongeBob has already eaten the entire pie. Mr. Krabs tells Squidward that SpongeBob will explode at sunset, and they decide not to tell him to let him enjoy his final hours. Squidward, overwhelmed with guilt, promises to make SpongeBob's last day the best ever. He spends the entire day doing everything on SpongeBob's friendship list, including showing Squidward to everyone in town, wearing a salmon suit, telling knock-knock jokes, and various other ridiculous activities. As sunset approaches, they watch it together, and Squidward becomes emotional thinking SpongeBob is about to die. But SpongeBob reveals he saved the pie in his pocket to share with Squidward. When he trips, the pie flies into Squidward's face and creates a massive explosion that destroys Bikini Bottom. But in this alternative timeline where Squidward and SpongeBob have months of complicated shared history, where guilt and respect and resentment are all layered together, this Employee Brotherhood Day situation becomes exponentially more emotionally charged from the very first moment. It's been about 2 weeks since the Employee of the Month competition where they both worked themselves to exhaustion and Mr. Krabs gave the award to someone else. The competitive energy has calmed, but there's still underlying tension. More significantly, it's been several weeks since the Squillium returns incident where Squidward asked SpongeBob to erase his memories, and Squidward has been carrying guilt about that ever since. He notices SpongeBob's fuzzy recollection of their shared experiences and knows it's his fault. When Squidward arrives at work on Employee Brotherhood Day, he's already in a bad mood because the concept of forced workplace bonding feels hollow after everything they've been through. Real brotherhood is what they experience during the pizza delivery or band geeks, not corporate-mandated gift exchanges. When Mr. Krabs announces they need to exchange gifts, Squidward immediately protests, saying he could never be paid enough to act brotherly towards SpongeBob. But his protest lacks the usual venom because part of him knows that statement isn't entirely true anymore. They've been through too much together for him to claim complete indifference, even if admitting that feels uncomfortable. When SpongeBob presents the sweater made from his eyelashes, the gesture hits differently in this timeline. SpongeBob says something like, "I made this to represent all the times you've looked out for me, Squidward. Your eyes have watched me learn and grow, so I used my eyelashes to make something for you." It's a sweet sentiment that references their trainer-trainee relationship and SpongeBob's genuine appreciation for Squidward's role in his development. The sweater itself is still itchy and disturbing, made from body parts, but the intention behind it is more meaningful than in the original timeline. When Squidward realizes it's made of eyelashes and throws it back in disgust, he sees SpongeBob's face fall in hurt, and that guilt he's been carrying intensifies. SpongeBob tried to make something meaningful, acknowledging their history together, and Squidward rejected it immediately. When SpongeBob starts crying and makes a second sweater from his tears, Squidward feels even worse. He's watching SpongeBob cry over his rejection, and he's thinking about all the times he's hurt SpongeBob's feelings, especially that time he made SpongeBob erase his memories for a selfish lie. Mr. Krabs insists Squidward needs to make a gift following the rules, and Squidward reluctantly agrees because the guilt is overwhelming him. He sees those pirates outside selling pies and thinks buying one will be a quick solution to fulfill the requirement. When the pirates say the pies were made in a bomb factory, Squidward assumes they're joking and buys one anyway for $25. He's not really thinking about the gift's meaning, he just wants to check the box and move on. When Mr. Krabs tests the pie and it explodes, launching both of them out of the Krusty Krab, Squidward is horrified. He tries to explain he had no idea it was actually a bomb. They rush back inside and find the pie is gone. SpongeBob appears having eaten the entire thing, thanking Squidward for the gift. The realization that SpongeBob is going to die hits Squidward like a tsunami of guilt. This isn't just about accidentally giving a bomb to an annoying coworker. This is about accidentally killing someone he's shared impossible experiences with, someone he trained, someone who saved him during Band Geeks, someone whose memories he already damaged. When Mr. Krabs says SpongeBob will explode at sunset, Squidward imagines SpongeBob serving a customer and then exploding into pieces, and the horror is visceral. Squidward frantically suggests calling the hospital, but Mr. Krabs says it won't help. He's seen this 11 times before. The absurdity of that statement barely registers because Squidward is processing the reality that SpongeBob has hours to live because of his careless gift buying. Mr. Krabs suggests they don't tell SpongeBob and just let him enjoy his final hours. When Squidward looks out the window and sees SpongeBob cheerfully cleaning tables, completely unaware he's dying, Squidward breaks down. He's thinking about everything they've been through. The pizza delivery where SpongeBob refused to give up, the art class where SpongeBob created beauty effortlessly, the Band Geeks performance where SpongeBob rallied everyone. All of that is going to end at sunset because Squidward took the easy way out with a gift purchase. Squidward declares through tears that he's going to make SpongeBob's final hours the best he's ever had, and this time there's going to be love. So much love that SpongeBob will drown in it. This declaration is more emotional than in the original because Squidward is trying to make up for months of harsh treatment, criticism, and especially the memory deletion. He's trying to cram genuine care and appreciation into a few hours because he never expressed it properly when he had time. When Squidward approaches SpongeBob and says there's a part 2 to the gift, SpongeBob's excitement is genuine but also layered with their history. He trusts Squidward more now after everything they've been through, even if he can't remember all of it clearly. When SpongeBob pulls out his friendship list, calling it the things he likes to do, and noting that extra fun items are written in red, Squidward sees that everything is in red. Every single activity SpongeBob considers extra fun, and he wants to share all of it with Squidward. In the original timeline, this was just SpongeBob being enthusiastic. But in this alternative timeline, this list represents SpongeBob's genuine desire to bond with someone who's been important in his life, someone he works with daily, someone he's accomplished things with. When Squidward says they better start now if they want to get through the list before SpongeBob dies of anticipation, There's a weight to those words because Squidward knows the real deadline. The first activity is showing Squidward to everyone in town as his best friend. In the original, this was simple and silly. But in this timeline, when SpongeBob introduces Squidward as his best friend to various townspeople, some of them have reactions based on knowing about their history together. One person says, "Oh, you're the duo who did that amazing performance at the Bubble Bowl." Another mentions, "I heard you guys had a crazy pizza delivery adventure." SpongeBob beams with pride introducing Squidward, and Squidward feels the weight of being called best friend by someone he's about to lose, someone he never properly appreciated. When they have to do the activity again with Squidward wearing a salmon suit and kids throw rocks at him, Squidward endures it without complaint because he's thinking about how little physical discomfort matters compared to what's coming at sunset. The knock-knock jokes, walking backwards making beeping sounds, making tongue noises, SpongeBob being Squidward's face, and the open heart surgery sequence all happen similarly to the original, but Squidward's attitude is different. He's not just tolerating these activities with barely concealed annoyance. He's actually trying to engage and make them meaningful because each activity could be the last thing they do together. When SpongeBob performs surgery on Squidward's heart and asks if he should be poking it like that, Squidward thinks darkly that his heart is going to be broken in a few hours anyway when SpongeBob explodes. The activities are ridiculous and uncomfortable, but Squidward pushes through them with determination because this is his last chance to show SpongeBob that he cared, even if he never admitted it properly. When they reach the final item on the list, watching the sunset, Squidward's face goes pale. He remembers Mr. Krabs saying SpongeBob has until sunset before the bomb hits his lower intestine. This is it, the moment SpongeBob will die, and they're going to spend it together watching the sun go down. Squidward suggests they watch it from a good spot, and they end up sitting together with Squidward, building a brick wall between them. The wall is both practical protection from the explosion and symbolic of all the emotional walls Squidward has kept between them throughout their relationship. When SpongeBob comments that it's just the three of them, you, me, and this brick wall you built between us, Squidward laughs nervously because that observation is more accurate than SpongeBob realizes. As they watch the sunset, SpongeBob talks about how sunsets remind him of bowls of fruit and asks what they make Squidward think of. Squidward imagines SpongeBob exploding and stammers explosions. I mean erosion, trying to cover his panic. Then SpongeBob says something that destroys Squidward emotionally. He says, "You know, if I were to die right now in some sort of fiery explosion due to the carelessness of a friend, well, that would just be okay." SpongeBob is literally describing exactly what's about to happen, calling it okay, forgiving Squidward in advance without even knowing he needs forgiveness. Squidward tears up because SpongeBob is so pure and trusting that even in death, he's not holding grudges. SpongeBob burps and mentions something dropped into his lower intestine, commenting that it smells like cherry or maybe grape. This is it, the bomb reaching its destination. The sun starts to go down, and SpongeBob asks Squidward to count down with him. Squidward counts 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, waiting for the explosion, expecting to watch SpongeBob die. Nothing happens. They start the countdown again, and Squidward hears an explosion behind the wall. He sobs through the numbers thinking SpongeBob just died, saying he at least made SpongeBob's final hours meaningful, declaring himself a good person. Another explosion knocks down the brick wall, and Squidward is covered in smoke. When it clears, SpongeBob is alive and well, blowing bubble versions of the bomb that explodes safely. Squidward's reaction is shock and confusion. He babbles incoherently, trying to process that SpongeBob is still alive. When SpongeBob says they already played Babble like an idiot on the list, Squidward demands to know why SpongeBob is still here. SpongeBob cheerfully explains that since they finished the list, he made a new one, an entire book called Friends Forever that should take them until January to complete. Squidward's emotional state flips from grief to frustration to confusion. He spent the entire day doing ridiculous activities, believing SpongeBob would die, processing all his guilt and regret, trying to show care he never properly expressed. And it was all for nothing because SpongeBob isn't dying. Squidward yells that he spent the whole day with SpongeBob doing ridiculous things because SpongeBob was supposed to explode. When SpongeBob asks if Squidward wants him to explode, Squidward screams, "Yes, that's what I've been waiting for." It comes out wrong, sounding cruel, but what he means is he was waiting for the inevitable consequence of the bomb. He explains about the pie being a bomb, bought from pirates for $25, and SpongeBob eating it. SpongeBob looks confused and asks, "What pie?" Then he pulls out the actual bomb pie from his pocket, revealing he saved it to share with Squidward. This moment hits differently in this timeline. SpongeBob saved the pie not just because he wanted to share dessert, but because sharing represents their friendship, their brotherhood, everything the day was supposed to celebrate. When SpongeBob says, "Let's eat," and trips, the pie flies towards Squidward's face in slow motion. Squidward has time to think about the irony that after spending all day believing he killed SpongeBob, he's about to die from the same bomb himself. The explosion is massive, destroying Bikini Bottom, and when the smoke clears, Squidward is lying in the rubble saying, "Ouch." But he's thinking about more than physical pain. He's thinking about how he spent the day confronting all his guilt and trying to make amends, only to discover SpongeBob wasn't dying. He's thinking about how SpongeBob wanted to share the pie because that's who SpongeBob is, someone who shares and cares and forgives. He's thinking about that brick wall he built between them, both literal and metaphorical, and how maybe it's time to start taking it down. The next day at work, after Bikini Bottom is presumably rebuilt, SpongeBob shows up cheerful as always. He mentions what a great day they had going through his friendship list, asking when they can start on the new book. Squidward is exhausted emotionally and physically, but he looks at SpongeBob differently now. He spent an entire day believing SpongeBob would die, processing all his feelings about their complicated relationship, confronting his guilt about the memory deletion and harsh treatment. Even though SpongeBob didn't die, that emotional journey was real. Squidward felt genuine grief at the thought of losing him, genuine desire to make amends, genuine recognition of SpongeBob's importance in his life. When SpongeBob asks if Squidward wants to do more activities together, Squidward surprises himself by not immediately refusing. He says something like maybe, but smaller doses, and without the salmon suit. SpongeBob is thrilled by this openness, interpreting it as Squidward finally embracing their friendship. Squidward isn't quite ready to use the word friendship, but he's more accepting of whatever their relationship is, this complicated bond between coworkers who've been through impossible things together. The dying for pie incident becomes another layer in their relationship, a day where Squidward confronted his feelings and realized that despite everything, losing SpongeBob would genuinely hurt him. That knowledge changes things going forward, making him slightly less harsh, slightly more tolerant, and occasionally, very occasionally, almost kind. If you're enjoying this twisted take on SpongeBob, make sure to subscribe for more alternative timeline breakdowns. Moving on to Squid's Day Off. In the original Squid's Day Off episode, it's a beautiful Sunday at the Krusty Krab, but there are no customers. Squidward complains about being trapped there when nobody's coming in anyway. He gets frustrated and slams the cash register down, causing coins to spill everywhere. Mr. Krabs hears his money dropping and rushes out to clean the coins. In the process, a dime goes down the drain, and Mr. Krabs gets his claw stuck trying to retrieve it. SpongeBob tries to help by pulling Mr. Krabs, which rips his arms off. Various objects fall on Mr. Krabs' head, and he has to go to the hospital. Before leaving, Mr. Krabs puts Squidward in charge. Squidward immediately sees this as an opportunity and gives SpongeBob a promotion where he runs both the cash register and the grill, so Squidward can take the day off with pay. SpongeBob is thrilled about the promotion and responsibility. Squidward tries to relax at home but becomes increasingly paranoid that SpongeBob will mess something up. He keeps imagining disasters like SpongeBob giving Patrick all the money or the Krusty Krab catching fire. Each time Squidward runs back to check, SpongeBob is handling everything perfectly. Squidward's paranoia escalates until he loses his sanity completely, barricading himself in his house, hallucinating SpongeBob in his mirror and bathtub, and eventually running naked through town back to the restaurant. When he arrives ranting about catching SpongeBob, SpongeBob calmly points out they forgot to flip the sign from closed to open, meaning there were never any customers and they could have both taken the day off. Squidward deflates completely in defeat. But in this alternative timeline where Squidward and SpongeBob have months of complicated shared history, this day off situation becomes psychologically deeper from the very beginning. It's been about 2 weeks since the dying for pie incident where Squidward spent an entire day believing SpongeBob would die and confronting all his feelings about their relationship. That emotional experience is still fresh in Squidward's mind. He's been slightly less harsh with SpongeBob since then, occasionally even being almost kind. Their relationship has evolved through training, the pizza delivery, band geeks, art class, Squillium returns with the memory deletion, the employee of the month competition, and dying for pie. They're not friends exactly, but there's something more complicated than just annoying coworkers. When the Sunday shift begins and Squidward complains about being trapped there with no customers, there's a different layer to his complaints. He's thinking about how he and SpongeBob have worked together through so many shifts, how they've survived impossible situations together, and yet here they are still stuck at the Krusty Krab on a beautiful day when nobody's coming in anyway. When he slams the cash register in frustration and coins spill everywhere, he immediately regrets it because he knows Mr. Krabs will overreact. Sure enough, Mr. Krabs treats it like a catastrophe, and the whole sequence with the dime in the drain and Mr. Krabs' arms getting ripped off happens similarly to the original. But when Mr. Krabs is being carried out on a stretcher and announces he's putting Squidward in charge, there's a moment where Squidward and SpongeBob make eye contact, and they both understand what this means. Squidward has been in training and supervisory positions with SpongeBob for months now. He knows SpongeBob's capabilities and limitations intimately. When Squidward announces his first official act as manager is to give SpongeBob a promotion, SpongeBob's eyes light up, because promotions from Squidward carry weight. This isn't Mr. Krabs giving him empty praise, this is his trainer acknowledging his progress. When Squidward explains the promotion means running both the cash register and the grill, SpongeBob hesitates for a moment. He asks, who will work the grill? And when Squidward says SpongeBob will do both jobs, there's brief uncertainty in SpongeBob's expression. He's thinking about the Employee of the Month competition, where he pushed himself too hard trying to do everything perfectly. He's thinking about training sessions where Squidward corrected his mistakes. But then he decides to trust himself and declares it's the best day of his life. When SpongeBob asks what Squidward will be doing, and Squidward says he has important boss-like errands to run, there's a moment where SpongeBob looks uncertain. He says Squidward, in a voice that suggests he's about to ask Squidward to stay. In the original timeline, this would just be SpongeBob wanting company. But in this alternative timeline, SpongeBob is thinking about how they work better as a team. The pizza delivery worked because they were together. Band Geeks succeeded because everyone collaborated. The art class showed that SpongeBob needs guidance. When SpongeBob asks Squidward to teach him how to use the cash register, there's genuine concern in his voice. Squidward explains, you just push the button and put the money inside, then starts to leave. SpongeBob is left alone hugging the cash register, saying he can't believe this is happening and that today he starts living, but there's an undercurrent of nervousness. As Squidward walks outside, his internal monologue is different from the original. He's not just congratulating himself on getting a paid day off. He's thinking about whether leaving SpongeBob completely alone was the right decision. He trained SpongeBob for months and knows SpongeBob is capable, but he also knows SpongeBob tends to overthink things and get anxious when left without guidance. Squidward tells himself he feels bad for poor little SpongeBob all by his lonesome, then says, oh, it'll pass, but it doesn't pass as easily as he expected. When he imagines SpongeBob at the register, his first thought isn't about SpongeBob doing something stupid, it's about SpongeBob being alone and uncertain. Then his imagination shifts to SpongeBob making change incorrectly, giving Patrick too much money, and Squidward realizes he forgot to explain how to make change properly. Squidward runs back to the Krusty Krab in a panic, bursting through the doors and checking the cash register immediately. Everything's fine. When SpongeBob asks if Squidward is done with his errands already, there's no judgment in his voice, just curiosity. Squidward claims he needed change for $1, and SpongeBob demonstrates he knows exactly how to make change, offering multiple configurations with coins balanced on various body parts. Squidward realizes SpongeBob is more than competent with basic register operations. He learned well during training. As Squidward leaves, he should feel relieved, but instead he feels uneasy. He knows he trained SpongeBob properly, so why is he worried? At home, Squidward sets up his lawn chair and sunbathing equipment, telling himself he deserves this day off. He's the boss. He worked hard. He's earned relaxation. But as he reclines, his thoughts immediately go to SpongeBob. He tells himself everything will be fine, there won't be any customers, SpongeBob will just stand there bored. Then he imagines SpongeBob getting so bored he falls asleep, and the Krusty Krab spontaneously combusts. This fear is different from the original timeline because Squidward actually knows SpongeBob has accidentally caused fires before. During training, there were incidents with the grill. SpongeBob once left the stove on when distracted. These aren't baseless paranoid fantasies, they're memories of actual training mishaps. Squidward tries to convince himself he's being ridiculous, that he's wasting valuable, relaxing time worrying unnecessarily. He pulls out his pocket watch and lectures himself about the odds of SpongeBob setting the Krusty Krab on fire. But then a fire truck drives past and Squidward runs back to the restaurant with a fire extinguisher, spraying foam everywhere. When the foam clears, SpongeBob is standing there perfectly fine asking, "May I help you, sir?" with a foam mustache. Squidward is embarrassed and defensive. When SpongeBob asks how those errands are going, Squidward interprets this as passive-aggressive judgment. He says, "I don't like your tone," and SpongeBob changes to a high-pitched voice asking, "How's that?" trying to be helpful. Squidward storms out grumbling, and SpongeBob comments no wonder Mr. Krabs put him in charge with genuine admiration, thinking Squidward's checking on things shows dedication. Back at home, Squidward struggles to relax. He cracks his back and sits down, pulling out a hand mirror and telling himself he's losing his bluish glow from worrying too much. He makes himself repeat, "You will not go back to the Krusty Krab," but his reflection transforms into SpongeBob saying, "I will destroy the Krusty Krab." This hallucination is more meaningful in this timeline because Squidward has actual memories of SpongeBob accidentally destroying things. The reef blower destroyed Squidward's house. The art class ended in Squidward destroying everything in rage. The Squillium Returns restaurant fell apart in chaos. Squidward's paranoia isn't completely unfounded. It's based on a pattern of chaos that follows SpongeBob despite his good intentions. Squidward runs back to the Krusty Krab screaming, "SpongeBob!" and SpongeBob starts to ask, "Have you finished?" But Squidward cuts him off with "No," and storms out. This cycle begins where Squidward keeps running back and forth between his house and the Krusty Krab, while SpongeBob keeps asking, "Have you finished those errands?" Each time Squidward returns, he's checking to make sure nothing has gone wrong, and each time SpongeBob is handling everything perfectly. The repetition drives Squidward increasingly insane because he's confronting a truth he doesn't want to acknowledge. SpongeBob doesn't need him there. All those months of training worked. SpongeBob is fully capable of running things alone. This should make Squidward feel proud and accomplished as a trainer, but instead it makes him feel unnecessary and obsolete. Finally, after running back and forth multiple times, Squidward arrives sweating and exhausted. SpongeBob is still calmly asking, "Have you finished those errands?" And Squidward snaps. He yells that he'll never be finished with errands, and SpongeBob should quit checking up on him. He accuses SpongeBob of forcing him to come back every time SpongeBob messes up. But in this timeline, Squidward's accusation is layered with months of complicated feelings. He's not just paranoid about SpongeBob messing up, he's anxious about his role in SpongeBob's life. If SpongeBob can handle everything alone, what was the point of all that training? If SpongeBob succeeds without Squidward's supervision, does that diminish Squidward's importance? When SpongeBob tries to say he hasn't messed up, Squidward cuts him off and says, "Maybe you haven't messed up yet, but you will." This is Squidward projecting his own insecurities. He's waiting for SpongeBob to fail, because if SpongeBob fails, it proves Squidward was right to worry and right to maintain his position as supervisor. But if SpongeBob succeeds completely without him, it means Squidward isn't as necessary as he thought. As Squidward backs away, ranting that he'll be there when SpongeBob messes up, laughing hysterically, SpongeBob watches with concern. He says, "Gosh, Squidward sure is a hard worker," because he's trying to interpret Squidward's insanity as dedication. SpongeBob rubs his two hats proudly, saying Squidward makes him proud to wear them, and there's genuine affection in this gesture. SpongeBob thinks Squidward's constant checking is because Squidward cares about the restaurant and about making sure SpongeBob succeeds. Squidward barricades himself in his house, using locks and wood and police tape and welding the door shut so he physically cannot leave. This is him trying to force himself to stop obsessing. He tells himself he won't think about, who at the, what doing, "I don't care," but of course he's already thinking about it by saying that. In the bathtub, when he hears what he thinks is SpongeBob laughing and spying on him, his paranoia takes a specific form based on their history. He thinks SpongeBob is checking to see if Squidward is really doing errands, which would mean SpongeBob doesn't trust him. After months of Squidward not trusting SpongeBob, the idea that SpongeBob might not trust him in return bothers Squidward immensely. He thinks he's caught SpongeBob messing up by leaving his post, but it's just a branch. He sees what he thinks is SpongeBob's silhouette behind the shower curtain, but it's just his toilet and toiletries. The hallucinations get worse. When SpongeBob actually appears in the bathtub asking, "Are you finished with those errands yet?" Squidward goes fully insane. He chases the hallucination down the drain and then runs naked through town, back to the Krusty Krab, ranting about catching SpongeBob. He runs past Mr. Krabs, who's just been released from the hospital, and Mr. Krabs' arms fall off again from shock seeing naked, deranged Squidward. When Squidward bursts into the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob is exactly where he's been the entire time, standing at the register calmly. Squidward rants about catching SpongeBob as a stick outside his window, and the toilet in his bathroom and in his bathtub, swimming down the drain to beat him there. As he's ranting, he slowly realizes how insane he sounds. SpongeBob looks confused and concerned, not guilty or caught. When Squidward finally admits yes, he's finished with those errands, there's defeat in his voice. He says he wants to take his place back at the cash register and hugs it, rubbing his face on it like a security blanket. SpongeBob quietly hands over his clothes and hat, whispering that Squidward might want to put them on. There's no judgment or mockery, just gentle concern. Then SpongeBob walks over to the sign and reveals they forgot to flip it from closed to open. He laughs, saying it's almost like they could have taken the whole day off. In the original timeline, this is just ironic. But in this alternative timeline, this revelation has deeper meaning. Squidward put himself through all that paranoia and insanity and running back and forth, questioning his worth and importance, driving himself crazy, worrying about whether SpongeBob could handle things, and none of it mattered because there was never any possibility of customers in the first place. Squidward's nose falls off and his head deflates. His whole body gently falls to the ground. But as he lies there deflated, he's thinking about what just happened. SpongeBob handled everything perfectly. SpongeBob didn't need constant supervision. SpongeBob was never going to mess up. All of Squidward's paranoia was his own insecurity about being needed and important. The training worked. SpongeBob is competent. That should be satisfying, but instead it just makes Squidward feel exhausted and deflated. The next day when they return to work and Mr. Krabs is back, things are slightly different between them. SpongeBob is more confident at the register now, having proven to himself he can handle responsibility alone. Squidward is quieter, processing the realization that maybe he doesn't need to supervise SpongeBob as intensely as he thought. Their complicated relationship continues, but with this new understanding that SpongeBob has grown beyond needing constant oversight, and Squidward needs to figure out what his role is now, if not SpongeBob's hovering supervisor. If you enjoyed exploring this alternative SpongeBob timeline, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next video.